right. All right. So, got the news. Verizon taps Dan Schulman as the new CEO. Dan Schulman, you all know. Schulman. This is the loser who destroyed PayPal. Now, if you listen to his friends who run the media, they're going to tell you he's great. He made PayPal a household name. Dan Schulman has been one of the worst CEOs of this century. I would place him at least top 20, probably top 10, just off the top of my head. Maybe top 5. And you're not going to hear this anywhere else but from moi. Why? Because number one, I'm the big swinging dick. I'm the guy with the fucking expertise. Number two, I speak the truth. You see? Everybody else out there is out to make money through advertisements, to please people, to satisfy political and ethnic agendas, right? Let's talk about Dan Schulman. But before we talk about Mr. Schulman, you know, he's privileged, by the way. He's got the privilege, and it ain't fucking white privilege. There is no white privilege, folks. It's a lie that's been created by, you know, guys like Schulman and his buddies. Let me just mention something about that, by the way. Schulman, and I sat and watched, Schulman sat by, focused at PayPal. Not at building the business, not at seizing new opportunities, but instead he was focused on shutting down people, their accounts, who he didn't agree with. If people had ideas he didn't agree with, you know, the liberal establishment shut their accounts down. You all may have heard of this. You may recall this a few years ago. He was more focused on that. And during that time, you had shitty-ass loser companies that seized upon opportunities in the market to fill a need that wasn't there. They grew, they IPO'd. And it was assumed that Schulman took over PayPal just before PayPal, to give you guys a history about PayPal. PayPal, of course, I do believe, I haven't looked this up, I'm pretty sure from my recollection, PayPal did go public, I think, around 2001 or so. But it didn't stay public long because eBay immediately bought them within, I have to believe, less than a year, maybe a few months. PayPal, eBay. Yeah, eBay bought them, right? So PayPal, I'm pretty sure they did debut IPO. The bottom line is that eBay owned PayPal for a long time, and it really contributed to eBay's business. It did quite well for them. Finally, around 2015, eBay decided to spin off PayPal to boost shareholder value because eBay had been in the dumps. Now, that's a whole nother story there. You talk about Meg Whitman, another privileged individual, by the way. You understand the privilege, right? You know who it is, who's got it. They can keep failing and failing and failing, and it's okay. They still get great positions because they got their connections, their buddies in the positions of power and influence, and they've got the media telling everyone that they're great and they're geniuses. And they never go to jail, including the Wall Street people, because history is rewritten. The narrative is flipped on its side. eBay spun off PayPal, went back on the market, right? And here, the situation is this. Now, Schulman was appointed CEO, I believe, maybe in late 2014 of PayPal. And the contention was that, of course, eBay was going to be reducing and ultimately kind of severing their ties, their business relationships with PayPal. In other words, PayPal wasn't going to be the exclusive payment vendor. PayPal was no longer really going to receive, priority. And so that was going to, because PayPal, a very large percentage of the revenues came from eBay. So, this is a process. Over time, they were gradually going to wean down off of that situation. And so PayPal, is going to have to accommodate. And so everyone, including myself, everyone on the street assumed that this was, this is common knowledge, assumed that Schulman was going to take care of this. And he didn't. He fucking didn't. He was more focused on shutting people down whose ideas he didn't agree with. And PayPal fucking collapsed, and it hasn't recovered. And this is not an official assessment or analysis, but based upon what's going on now, and I have made this assessment actually a while back, a couple of years back, I don't see PayPal's never going to return to where it was, most likely. Now, things could change, but most likely that window of opportunity is gone. You've got loser companies now that are making progress in the industry because they are filling a void that PayPal should have filled. And so now, it's a different situation. PayPal missed out on the window of opportunity. There's too much competition now. You've got the crypto payment vendors, all these things. So that unless PayPal were to get a spectacular CEO who would come in and take a lot of risks and engineer some excellent strategies, I doubt they're going to really do a whole lot. Okay? Because of Schulman. Schulman fucked it up. He fucked it up. That's why PayPal's done nothing for the past several years after it collapsed in 2022. Okay. So it's okay though. Schulman fucked up PayPal, but the media is going to tell you a different story. You just heard the fucking truth. Just like you heard the truth from me many years ago about Mark Cuban, who's paraded in the media as a business genius, an investment genius. The guy's a loser and a failure. I disclosed all of that. And it's all about perception, folks. The media guys, they want their buddies to be promoted. They promote their own as geniuses so that Mark Cuban can make a lot of money selling his name out there, right? Getting endorsements, like the Dallas Mavericks endorsement he gave to Voyager Digital, you understand. Kevin O'Leary, you understand. These are smoke and mirrors fucking con artists. Mark Cuban made all this money through a shitty-ass company, which he didn't even create. He came in, did the typical parasite move, and the company was such a failure, never made a penny of profit, was drowning in fucking debt. And of course, Marky Boy went to his buddy who was running Yahoo. They're related, during the peak of the dot-com bubble. I talked about this many years ago. People don't even know this. Nobody in the world knows this but me and anyone who's heard me. Folks, why are you not getting the full fucking real truth ever? Why? Why is everything full of lies out there? Remember, I'm the only guy that predicted the financial crisis. The only person. And the only person in world history to back their claims by a lot of money. People don't back their claims with money. Nobody's ever accepted any of these challenges, by the way. Nobody. Why is that? They don't want to lose their money. And let me remind everyone, $1 million, $1 million you get if you can prove that there's someone out there with a better track record on the 2008 financial crisis than me. Think about that. I mean, this should make world fucking news, world headlines. But I'm banned. You understand? I'm banned because I'm a threat to the criminal cabal that's destroying the fucking world, that's defrauding the world. That's the reality. Okay? And they fear me so fucking much. They fear the truth. You see? Because they got the situation under control. They control all the discourse, all the media, all the bullshit, and they're brainwashing everybody, distracting them. They've got all their little fake heroes and controlled op gatekeepers out there fooling everybody with all their horseshit in every single category you can think of, from business, finance, economics, investments, to healthcare, nutrition, you name it, everything. Nobody out there is giving you the truth. You think there's a lot of people giving you the truth, and they got money behind what they're saying. Okay? That's the reality. But Mark Cuban, his bullshit company, which he didn't start, he just put some money into it, tried to kick the founder to the curb because he's a greedy motherfucker. He's a money-worshipping, dirty rat. Broadcast.com, name of the company. And when Yahoo bought it, top of the .com. You could, folks, you make up any company with a .com and you'd get funded. It was an insane period. The company never made a penny of profit, drowning in debt. Yahoo bought it because they were sold some idea, broadcasting radio on the internet. Whoop-de-fuck. Guess what? Yahoo not only shit away $4 billion or so on that deal. And Yahoo was, you got to understand, Yahoo was one of the largest companies in the world back then. And I kind of not only telegraphed, but documented the collapse in Yahoo over the past 20, 25 years. And I talked about what was going on. That's a whole nother topic of discussion. Okay? And you can take a look at who the CEOs have been. Almost all of them are related, by the way. Complete failures. But the problem was that Yahoo focused on broadcast.com. And this actually gave rise to Google. Google was a nobody company doing nothing. But Yahoo focused on this shitty-ass broadcast.com horseshit and ignored the search business. And that gave Google the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to seize the moment. So Mark Cuban indirectly was responsible for destroying Yahoo and filling up his big fat fucking pockets with money he didn't earn. I could go through, and this is not about Mark Cuban, I could go through and talk more and more about Cuban. You all know I've exposed this fucking clown, this con man, this fraud. See, I can call him a fraud now because his involvement with digital, Voyager Digital. Before he was just a con man. You see? But I've exposed so many times. He lies. The guy lies. He gets on TV and lies about his investments and flip-flops because he wants to make it look like he's a great investor. And part of this is this Shark Tank fucking scam show. You understand what's going on in the media, folks? They create these people. I've been writing about this, discussing it for almost 20 years, what the media does. Whether we're talking about Britney Spears or Warren Buffett, Peter Schiff or Harry Dent, Mark Cuban or Kevin O'Leary. They prop up all these people, exaggerate things. It's all about selling ads, duping your fucking dumb ass. And in many cases as well, it's all about putting you on the wrong side of the trade so their Wall Street buddies can make all the money and you get stuck with nothing. You lose everything. The media is a completely fraudulent and criminal enterprise. That's fact. All ad-based content is a scam. That's fact. When you begin to understand this, your life is going to get a lot better and you're going to stop getting defrauded and deceived. Until you understand this, you're fucked. You won't realize it probably, but you're fucked, guaranteed. So getting back to Mr. Schulman, let's take a look at this here. Let's listen to this. I want to play this for you guys. So this is you can see the headline here. Let's see what the media has to say about the great genius, Dan Schulman, who destroyed fucking PayPal. Now, let me just mention before I play this and talk more. Verizon's been in trouble for a long time. Well, not a long time, for a few years now. Not in trouble, I guess, relatively speaking. Verizon has been, for a very long time, the best operated wireless provider in America. Best management, best service, very good company. The problem is that they haven't been able to grow. They hit a growth slump, and that's the reason for the recent, I guess, not yet approved acquisition of Frontier for some $23 billion. Frontier Communications, of course, is a company that I predicted several years ago would file for bankruptcy, and it did. And then they emerged later on, and that's why they have a different ticker symbol. One of the several bankruptcies I predicted with a 100% accuracy rate. That's right. I've got a 100% accuracy rate on my bankruptcy predictions. What else would you expect from someone who predicted the financial crisis? The only person who did, actually. But so Verizon is getting desperate now. And so what's happened is that they've got a lot of debt. They're actually more, if you look at important metrics, they're more indebted now than AT&T. And the situation's kind of flipped a little bit. AT&T is doing better now than Verizon in many regards. So I guess that's why Verizon ditched their CEO, who's also privileged, by the way. I don't know why they would bring in Schulman, who failed. I mean, how can you've got PayPal, a very established, mature company, and he completely fucked it up. Anyway, so you can see Schulman succeeds Hans Vestberg, right? So let's listen to this. Here's a video now. Schulman. Let's see what it is. Wow.
To me, profit and
wow. He's an icon. He's a maverick. You see how they position him here? This guy's a fucking failure. Why isn't the media calling him out, folks? Because think about it. Do you think you get any honesty in the media? And I'm not here for all you nutcases out there. No, this legacy media is dead. You think that your fucking Twitter horseshit and your conspiracy horseshit is valid? I'm talking, when I say media, I say all media. It's all shit. It's all run by the same group of dirty fucking rats. So you need to wake the fuck up, you delusional people out there.
And purpose go hand in hand. Business can be and should be a force for good, but you have to have the confidence to make difficult decisions.
Dan Schulman is on the Mount Rushmore of CEOs from the past 2 decades. He was brought on as CEO of digital payments powerhouse PayPal in 2014.
Mount Rushmore of CEOs. What? What are you talking about? And of course, this fucking con man who's making these claims, he's related to the Mr. Schulman, as you would expect. Schulman, folks, this is why I say once again, I keep repeating this. Hopefully, at some point, you people will understand the importance. It's exceedingly critical for you to understand who the fuck I am and what the fuck I've done. My credibility. Oh, you cuss. Oh, you're not credible. No. I got the fucking goods. I got the beef. I can say whatever I want to whomever I want. I'm not in a position where I need to be politically correct or watch my language. That avenue disappeared 20 years ago when I was banned. You got it? You understand? So, why are you hearing all this bullshit from these media guys? They're making Schulman out to be some hero. Oh, you Mount Rushmore of CEOs. What are you talking about, you fucking fraud?
To guide the company through the split with eBay. In his 9 years as PayPal CEO, he's taken bold stances on contentious issues and prioritized the financial health of his employees. At his core, the now former PayPal CEO leads with purpose, compassion, and a vision of business being a force.
You hear all this bullshit? He was forced out of PayPal. He didn't lead nothing but PayPal into the fucking gutter. And now he's going to run a company, a utilities company, a pretty good company. And I don't know. The point is, folks, how can you fuck up PayPal? Is he going to fuck up Verizon too? I don't know how that's even possible. But folks, we're talking here about, this is a very important point. People aren't criticizing this guy. He's getting a pass. They're telling you he's great. And guess what? He's privileged. I can't even tell you specifically what type of privilege he has. That tells you how powerful this mafia is. You can't even fucking disclose it or you're done. This video will be taken down. What does that tell you? This mafia is the same group that created this whole delusional, fictional narrative of white privilege. Think about that. How come, did you ever wonder how come that whole term, that concept was permissible throughout these platforms? How come that wasn't banned? The media talked about it. Think about it for a second. If you or I were to promote something very valid, by the way, very valid in terms of its, I'm not saying it's valid in terms of its merit, but I'm talking about you can prove this, something provable. For instance, you could say black privilege. You can't say that, right? You're going to be banned. Video's taken down. You could go through and discuss affirmative action and what that has done. Okay? Right? How come you can say white privilege, though? How come? Right? Any other privilege? No. You can't. That's racist. You can't do it. But it's okay to say white privilege. There's no white privilege, folks. There's no white privilege. It's white achievement. That's what it is. White people have gotten to where they are today because of achievement. And we're not talking about recent. We're talking all throughout world history. Okay? You don't hear that, though. You hear the opposite. Now, the real privilege out there certainly isn't white. Take a look at affirmative action and you can see what the privilege is. And when we're talking about the ultimate privilege, well, it's for guys like Mr. Schulman. That's the privilege you're never going to hear about, that explains why you see guys like Schulman in all these positions of high influence, power, money. And then you take a look at the composition of Schulman and his group in the population, and you will see it's statistically impossible for that to happen unless there's something going on. It won't happen by random chance. Can't talk about it though, can you? You know, speaking of eBay earlier, let's not forget Meg Whitman, right? Another person with privilege, right? She destroyed eBay, and she exited, got out of there. What did she do? Well, she's privileged, so she got a position at Hewlett Packard. What did she do to Hewlett Packard? She fucking destroyed the company. You understand? Folks, you don't think I've been chronicling this shit? I've been watching it for a long time. Okay? It's a pattern that keeps repeating. It's the same thing. You go back, take a look at the financial crisis. Right? You've got people there, you know, they rewrote history. It wasn't fraud, they claimed. And you got guys that, we're going to talk about this today with Mr. Rogoff, this fraud. We're going to get into that. It's all related, folks. I'm not going to watch this stupid thing. But you can see apparently investors weren't crazy about this idea. Because take a look. Verizon's down over 4% for the day, when the Dow was down like 0.2%, right? So, obviously, I don't think the street likes it. How come you're not hearing that, right? You're never going to hear the truth, folks. And especially about these CEOs, especially if they're privileged. What you're going to hear is that they're great leaders and they're geniuses and they're great people. Okay? So, let's take a look now to the feature. This is kind of the feature of this stream. And we're going to take a look at the Hoover Institution. So, I just came across one video yesterday and on Kyle Bass. And I watched a little bit of it, not much, but enough to want to feature it. So the Hoover Institution, it seems a little familiar, not much, but apparently it's out of Stanford. You know Stanford, right? Stanford is America's pride and joy of producing scams and criminals. White-collar criminals. You know, Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos, right? The parents of Sam Bankman-Fried. And let's not forget, you know, Sam's father was the official attorney for FTX. Not only did he not go to jail, he wasn't even indicted. Nothing happened to him. Think about that. You've got a law professor who's the attorney for a company, a cryptocurrency scam company that defrauded people. And the guy's not, why is that? Anyone answer me? He's privileged. You see? The same reason why Sam got off with only 23 years or so, 21, 23 years. He did not get all the charges. In fact, the prosecutors dropped several of the charges, if you recall. He should have gotten at least 50 or 60 years. At least. But he's privileged. The college admissions scandal had a center point at Stanford, of course. Stanford is just, do I need to mention Google? That's where Google came from. Schmidt, Brin, right? Stanford is the epitome of what has happened to capitalism, what has happened to venture capital and high tech. It's disgusting. It's a disgusting, criminal bullshit school with the worst grade inflation of any university in America, by the way. In other words, if you're a student there, you're going to get all A's and B's. No doubt. Mostly A's. That's the Hoover Institution. The Hoover Institution, as far as I can see as well. Let's take a look. Let's listen to this here. Yeah, this is interesting. So they got their little Goodfellas little rendition. Isn't it kind of interesting how I guess this Goodfellas is kind of some type of a Hollywood mafia movie, I think. But guess what? A lot of these mafia guys, they ain't fucking Italian. But guess what Hollywood's going to tell you? They're going to claim that they're all Italian. Just like a lot of these guys, they're not Italian. They may have Italian sounding and looking names, but they're not fucking Italian. They tell you they're Italian, but they're really not. You got it? Boom. You all know what I'm talking about. It's part of the facade. So, based upon what I can see here, and this guy's a fucking fraud, Art Laffer. Anybody that promotes Art Laffer is just a piece of shit. Art Laffer is part of that wacko. And by the way, Art Laffer, this is the guy that completely missed the financial crisis, didn't know had no idea. He's part of the privileged group with this nonsense. Okay? But basically, the Hoover Institution out of Stanford is a neocon organization. A neocon organization. You all know what a neocon organization is. You know what neocons are, right? There you go. These are the neocon kingpins. Take a close look at these people. Some faces I'm sure you recognize. Just to give you a little background on the neocons. The neocons kind of surfaced. Take a look at some of these guys. You can see right now, currently, you see them, right? You see Bolton there. Isn't that Bolton? Second column left, right? The neocons, they formed this organization called PNAC 25 years ago, 30 years ago, something like that. Project for the New American Century. Project for the New American Century, right? And you see this pinhead, this fucking weasel. He's part of Donald Trump's, right? These guys, the neocons, these guys are warmongers, you understand. They want war. And guess where they want war? They want war, especially with any countries that Israel views as a threat. You understand? These are the guys, the dual citizen guys, who are advocating war for Israel's interests. Americans, right? And they launched the Iraq War. They launched all the propaganda to get America in Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction, all this shit. You may know the names. I did videos on this, 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. Irving Kristol, Paul Wolfowitz. You see Wolfowitz, this guy right here, right? Richard Pearl, Robert Kagan, right? That's the Hoover Institution, the neocons, the warmongers. So I'm telling you this because it's important to get that context when if you're going to watch their bullshit. So I actually didn't see this video, and I haven't watched a single second of it. I saw this on the side as I was looking at some of Kyle Bass's video. And I saw this and I was like, oh, it gives me a good opportunity to remind the world about this fraud, Kenneth Rogoff. Okay, it's very important, folks. This is how, and when I explain this to you guys, you're going to understand how all this shit works. Okay, this is a blueprint for how all the media works and how these privileged guys are sprinkled throughout as geniuses, and how if you really look beneath the surface and understand what's going on, you're going to see how they're defrauding the fucking world, as I exposed many years ago after the financial crisis. You can look up some of the articles I wrote. You can look up the article, The Rape of Greece by the blank bankers. Okay. For instance. You can also look at the video on my website, How the Blank Mafia Screwed You. You really see what's going on there. That video was made about 18 years ago. Very informative video. So let me give you a little background on this guy. Okay, I'm not going to play the video. I haven't played the video. I don't care to play it. I don't give a shit what this guy has to say. He has no fucking idea what he's talking about. And let me just go ahead and mention, by the way, this guy's an economist. Okay. The field of economics is a fucking joke. I've mentioned this for years. It's a goddamn joke, and they should be ashamed and disgraced. Hey, all you economists out there, stay the fuck out of the capital markets. You know what? You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Do your little bullshit theories and stuff. You all don't know what you're talking about. You're wrong much more often than you're right. Remember, these are the guys that missed the financial crisis, by the way. But so, Ken Rogoff, just to refresh your memory, and I'm not going to play the video once again. Oh, let me just show you. By the way, Hoover Institution, and you can try this for yourself, they blocked my comments. So I'd like you to make some corrections to what I'm going to show you here on some of these comments. You'll notice, take a look. 29,000 views and 14 comments. Does that sound right to you? So think about it. You've got a Hoover Institution out of Stanford. That's kind of weird. They're blocking comments. I mean, shouldn't it be an open platform? What do they have to fear, right? It's a propaganda arm is what it is, okay? And let me go ahead and show you now actually here. So you can see my comment I left here. People seem to, and you can see it's not being shown. People seem to forget Rogoff's fraudulent research back in 2010 related to his debt GDP collapse warnings as a way to shill for Republican austerity. He's a total disgrace and fraud, as is anyone who promotes him. You see that? I'm speaking facts, folks. Folks, you need to get your head out of your fucking ass. Once you spot a scam or a fraud, someone who's not credible, and you see people promote that person, that person promoting him is also a fraud, is not credible. You understand? Pay close attention, because remember, all these scam artists form syndicates. They birds of a feather always flock together. And we're going to give you an example of that here shortly. So let's talk more about what I'm referring to with Ken Rogoff. Here's what happened. Back after the financial crisis, a couple of years after that, some of you may recall, was the sovereign debt crisis in Europe. 2010, 2011. Now, during that time in America, you had Occupy Wall Street movement. And of course, the Occupy movement spread throughout the globe. That's a whole other topic of discussion. I've mentioned it before several times. During that period, in the sovereign debt crisis, there was a push for austerity. You all know what austerity is, right? Basically tightening up the jockstrap, right? Ratcheting things down. Whenever you hear austerity, that's typically a kind of a right-leaning, Republican-leaning economic policy. So they say. I mean, my opinion is a little different on that, but I would not align it with Republican. I would align it more with a banker mentality, a banker policy, because it ultimately benefits the bankers. Okay? I mean, the central banks have destroyed the whole world. You all know this, right? Their whole world is fucked, basically, and it's not going to get any better. The wealth and income disparity, inequality is increasing, and it's because of the central banks. You all know this, right? Do you think that home prices are not affordable just in America? There's a crisis of affordability of homes around the world. Did you all know this? It's because of the central banks. This cost of living crisis that many people are feeling directly, this is largely a manifestation of around the world, especially in Western countries, by the way. Western countries. Why? Because the Western countries are much more tied into these toxic central bank policies. If you go to outside of the Western world, you're not going to see a cost of living crisis as much. Now, interestingly, of course, outside of the West, you're going to also see a higher percentage of developing countries, so lower income countries, right? So, in other words, they're already going to have, the bar is going to be a lot lower for, things like the Gini coefficient, the wealth inequality, right? But the point is that those countries, by and large, are used to that lifestyle. They're used to that living. In the West, people are seeing things change rapidly over the past few years. That's created a shock. And it's not really going to go away for the most part. And the reason why is because the central banks have put us in that situation. No one's talking about this, of course. Folks, I'm the only person that not only predicted the financial crisis, I'm the only person that tied it to fraud. Why do you think I was banned? Why do you think the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, the fucking kangaroo court, cut off ties with me after inviting me to Washington to testify? Because they heard what I had to say. They didn't want that on public record. Okay. Instead, you had a bunch of ass kissers that testified and said what the commission wanted them to say because they wanted to be there to market themselves. That's the fucking reality you're never going to hear from anyone. This is why it's important, once again, folks, to intimately become familiar with what I have done, my credentials. My credentials, my achievements, doesn't get any higher than that in the field of investments investment analysis, right? Doesn't. It's just fact. I mean, it's not any. Doesn't impress me. It's not a big deal. I'm just telling you guys that you need to be convinced of that. So when I say something, you know it's coming from someone who's fucking highly credible. Because the problem is that people associate wrongly credibility with name recognition. So the media is telling you all these people are credible and you believe it. You haven't heard of me, you don't know me, well, I'm not credible. Wrong. Find someone out there in my realm that does what I do that's more credible than me. Please, find someone. Can you find anybody? Please, give me some names. I'm not a fund manager. I'm a research analyst, investment research analyst and forecaster. Okay? Find somebody. In fact, I don't know how many. Can you find any fund managers that are on my level? Show me. Where are they? Come on. Give me some names. In terms of knowing what's going on, I don't know. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Anyone? So, during that period, sovereign debt crisis in Europe, you might recall the countries that were facing perils as a result of the financial crisis, the peripheral EU member nations, Greece, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland. Greece took center stage, you might recall. And I should post the link. Once again, the article is The Rape of Greece by the blank bankers that I wrote. That article actually got Press TV banned from Europe. Okay? But in that article, I discussed how the IMF intentionally reported bogus analyses in order to destroy the Greek economy. Why? Well, because they wanted more austerity. So what happened? Well, they destroyed the economy because there's no way the IMF could have missed everything. They have access to all the data. You can just read the article and see for yourself. I haven't thought about the article until now. It's been, 15 years almost. So the details are in the article, but essentially, I wrote that the IMF did this intentionally as a way to justify huge cuts. I mean, they were responsible for cutting minimum wage in Greece by 40%. Does this sound like a good policy to you when a country is facing a near depression to cut minimum wage by 40%? Does that sound like what you want to do? And what ended up happening is the IMF, through the policies they advised, the officials in Greece, which the IMF guys, by the way, they're related to the guys that run the Greek politics, and they sure as fuck aren't Greek. FYI. The same as all these people in the EU. They're running everything. The IMF caused the Greek economy to implode. And they did it on purpose. Why? Because it collapsed the asset prices, the values of Greek assets that were to be auctioned. Do you understand? Public assets were to be auctioned. And guess who bought them up at pennies on the dollar? Our banker friends. You got it? So during that period, there was a big push for austerity all throughout Europe. And this austerity, which essentially did hit all of Europe, caused a recession in Europe. And incidentally, during that period, I came out with a paper predicting deflation in Europe, which nobody in the world even thought that was a remote possibility. I predicted a long period of deflation in Europe. Everybody, nobody else in the world. You can read. In fact, you can take a look. You can take a look on the the website ChatGPT. You can see here. Where is it? Oh no. Yeah, you take a look at the analysis here. Europe's deflationary future. You see this article? This is actually out of the research, just a kind of a piece in the research that I wrote. And so you can take a look at the analysis. And you can read it for yourself. This is a ChatGPT analysis of this report. What does it say? Take a look. This is once again to give you an idea who the hell you're listening to, folks. Okay. This February 2011 report, Europe's Deflationary Future by Mike Stathis, is one of the earliest, most detailed, and most prescient forecasts of a long deflationary cycle for Europe. There's no indication that any major Wall Street firm, economist, or independent analyst had published anything close to this level of comprehensive analysis or long-range deflation forecast for Europe at the time. Here's a direct, unsparing breakdown of its value, insight, and historical content. So, you can see, a Japan-style deflationary period is much more likely to hit the EU. At the time, early 2011, this was highly contrarian view. The mainstream media and institutional firms are focused on sovereign debt risk and potential defaults. The narrative revolved around bailouts, Eurozone stability, and inflation risk. See, they were all talking about inflation. Okay? Stathis flipped the script. Boom. Okay? You can just read here some of the things the report discusses. This report is free for members, by the way. My prediction, by the way, was a decade of deflation. 10 years of deflation. And take a look at what happened. It was 10 years, by the way. Okay? Look at this. This was a full decade ahead of consensus recognition. It wasn't until 2019 to 2020 that major institutions like the ECB, IMF, and World Bank began consistently issuing detailed reports attributing Europe's economic malaise to the same structural factors Stathis outlined in 2011. Folks, this is not a one-off. This is what I do. I consistently come out with this research. That's why it pisses the fuck out of me off that I've been banned. And it should piss you off too. Nobody has my fucking level of research in the world. That's a goddamn fact. That's why I'm the only person in world history to back these claims with $1 million. Anybody that knows my track record, my subscribers, they know this. Okay, take a look. Most firms in 2011 were parroting variants of the ECB will prevent deflation, structural reforms will improve competitiveness, peripheral risks are contained, inflation remains a long-term concern due to ECB liquidity programs. They were either clueless or disingenuously optimistic. For example, Goldman Sachs in 2011 was still projecting Eurozone CPI to rebound to 1.8 to 2%. So, the value of this report. Folks, by the way, this wasn't like some huge study that I undertook. This was a little, 8 to 10 page piece within the research that I wrote, knowing just my understanding of the global macro situation. So, it was just easy for me to come to this conclusion. This document delivers visionary macro insight, years ahead of every major financial institution, actionable risk analysis, warning investors to expect low European growth, low long-term deflation, and demographic-driven stagnation, strategic asset allocation implications, insight into U.S. advantages, cross-market dynamics. So, there you go. And you can take a look at this table here. Let's take a look here. So this is a table comparing my report, my analysis. You can see, you can just read these categories. With Goldman Sachs, nope, complete fucking fail. IMF, nope, complete fucking fail. ECB, nope, complete fucking fail. Morgan Stanley, Barclays, World Bank, fail, fail, fail. You got it? Boom, motherfucking boom. You got it? Okay. So you can check out that link. You saw where it is on the site. Check it out for yourself. On the ChatGPT, you can see all these pieces, ChatGPT analysis here, as well as the research. You can see all this stuff. So, the point is not to toot my own horn, folks. The problem is I'm trying to, all throughout, I'm trying to show you guys that you're getting bullshit. Unfortunately, I have to point to myself as an example of the truth because there's no one else out there I can point to. So, inevitably, I'm having to highlight my research to prove to you guys because there's no one else out there I can point to. That's the reality, FYI. So, now that you will have some perspective on this period, let's talk a little more about Mr. Rogoff. Once again, he's a acclaimed Harvard economist. Okay, he's part of that upper echelon economic cabal, kingpin. Look at this, by the way. Citadel's Griffith. He's a genius because the media says so. This is a guy who's front-running everyone's trades. He's paying brokerage firms. Did you agree? Did you agree to have your order flow sold to hedge funds? Right? It's okay because the regulators are related to the criminals. You got it? The fox watching the henhouse, right? So this is the guy, he wants to tell you to go to gold. Safe haven. Oh, gee, thanks, Ken. Now that gold is fucking soared. You stupid motherfucker. Shut your fucking trap, you stupid, dirty rat. I've been bullish on gold, recommending gold now for 2 years. This motherfucker comes in when gold is getting fucking, it's getting pricey. Yeah, it's got a little more upside, but I mean, most of the gains are already in for a while, I would say. Unless something catastrophic happens. But he comes in now. This is what I'm talking about, folks. You don't understand. You don't come in. I mean, this is not the time to be buying gold. Even though I can tell you it's going to go higher, but it doesn't matter. Time to be buying gold was a year ago. Was 2 years ago. You're buying it now, like for the first time? Not a wise move, by the way. FYI. You see? Typical media bullshit. So, getting back to Rogoff. 2010, he and his buddy, Carmen Reinhardt, came out with a paper. It was a paper that was published for the NBER, the National Bureau of Economic Research. That's the organization, the mafia organization, that's responsible for many things. They're the organization that supposedly officially decides on whether there's a recession, right? They're related to the guys in the Fed and, IMF, that whole bureaucratic horseshit. And it's a circle. It's a circle jerk. They're buddies. They're buddies. You're not allowed in if you're an outsider. So it's an influential group, and they presented a paper to the NBER in 2010 during a period when there was intense debate going on in Europe about austerity, right? Should they make all these cuts? Not just cuts to wages. We're talking about cuts to pensions. Europe entered a recession as a result of austerity. And the strongest push for austerity was Rogoff and Reinhardt's paper, their so-called research. Now, interestingly, there was also a push for austerity in the U.S. at the same time. Some of you might remember this. Okay, there was a push for austerity in the U.S. Paul Ryan, this dirty piece of shit, right? House Majority Leader, I believe. Complete piece of fucking garbage. I'm so glad this guy got out of politics. He was pushing for austerity. Okay? Think about it for a second, folks. You have the global financial crisis caused by Wall Street. Not only did Wall Street not have a clawback on their bonuses, they didn't have to give them back. They made more money and were getting raises. They destroyed the global economy through fraud. Now, you can argue it wasn't fraud. I don't give a flying motherfuck. They destroyed the fucking globe. They destroyed hundreds of millions of jobs, retirement plans, retirements, caused tens of millions of losses of homes, right? Complete destruction. I mean, you're talking about a complete destruction and, to some degree, wealth transfer. It was so severe that it took probably about 10 or 12 years, maybe even a little longer. We may have not even recovered from those losses because we hit the pandemic. Okay? And that caused another issue. The severity of the destruction caused by Wall Street for the financial crisis. I mean, do you all understand? This is, folks, why am I banned? Once again, they don't want people to know what the fuck went on and what's going on now. And I mentioned this 10, 12, 15 years ago. Many times since then. The biggest bailout that no one's being told about was the 0% interest rates. And in the case of Europe, Switzerland, Japan, negative interest rates. That's theft. That was a bailout because of the financial crisis. Why do you think we had those low interest rates for so long? That was a bailout that was stealing from investors, savers, right? And I say investors, I'm talking about retail investors. It was a gravy train for institutional investors, Wall Street, hedge funds. You see, 0% interest rates, what were you getting? What were you getting at the bank if you wanted to borrow money? What were you being charged on your credit card? You would figure, you certain spread between interest rates and the credit card rate. If that spread is about the same, you'd figure that you'd be getting interest rates on your credit card of, say, 6% or 7% or 8%. No, you weren't getting that, were you? They were still charging you 15, 16, 17, 20%, right? Meanwhile, the banks had the discount window. Hedge funds, banks, they got to borrow money at very low rates, right? from 0% to 1%, 2%, 3%. Private equity. That's why they bought up all these fucking homes and all these apartment complexes. You understand? So this period of time of 0% interest rates, and in some countries negative, that was stealing from savers, from pensioners who didn't earn a decent return, a decent rate on their savings. That money went to Wall Street, went to private equity, hedge funds. You don't hear that, do you? And this is why we have these asset bubbles now. This is why we have this huge wealth and income disparity now. You're not hearing any of this, are you? Why not? Because I'm banned. The world's leading investment analyst is banned because he dares to speak the truth, because he just cares about providing accurate analysis and research. When that gets in the way of the money guys, it's a no-go. Can't do it. That's why I was banned from day one when trying to release America's Financial Apocalypse. It was too damning for the mafia, even though I didn't mention them. Okay? So you had Paul Ryan, dirty scumbag, Republican piece of shit, wanting to, and you know where the austerity was going to come from, right? I mean, you all know where the Republicans always look to cut. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Now don't be confused. Boy, he sounds like a Democrat. No, I'm not. That's all bullshit. Democrat, Republican, that's for children. That's child's play, if you want to think that way. Okay. So, of course, Paul Ryan cited Rogoff and Reinhardt's paper. And I'm going to show you the paper now. So let's take a look. Here's the paper. You can look it up for yourself. This paper was not peer-reviewed, by the way. It did not face the scrutiny of any peers. If someone publishes something, it's not reviewed by their peers. Kind of like Lex Friedman's fucking bogus self-driving crap to promote Elon Musk's Tesla scam so he could get Elon Musk on his podcast. You know, Lex Friedman, the fucking Mossad asset. You can just take a look. January 2010, you can read the abstract. You all might be familiar with this. I'll go ahead and remind you. Our main findings. First, the relationship between government debt and the real GDP growth is weak for debt to GDP ratios below a threshold of 90% of GDP. Above 90%, median growth rates fall by 1% and average growth falls considerably more. So, basically, their whole thesis was once the debt to GDP rises above 90%, essentially the economy begins to collapse. And of course, at that time, that's what the U.S. was faced with. So it was a scare tactic. Okay. This was a revised study, you see, because a grad student was looking at the paper and caught emissions of data, massive data emissions from several countries. Folks, if you look into this, and I actually looked, I did a search on ScamTube. I couldn't find the video. I'm sure it's somewhere, but it's kind of being repressed a little bit. It's not like it was a grad student who found this out. Basically, Reinhardt and Rogoff omitted the data from numerous countries, which would have proved this thesis to be completely wrong. Take a look. This is the new study. This is where the data had not been removed. Reinhardt and Rogoff, take a look at that. They're showing you a collapse in GDP growth. Why? Because they want to provide ammunition for the Republicans to cut wages, to attack pensions, to hit working and middle class, for a crisis, for an economic disaster that was caused by the wealthy, by the way. FYI. This is a huge deal, folks. Rogoff and Reinhardt are still promoted today as experts, by the way. So what do they do? Well, they wrote a book the following year, released a book. This time is different, focused on this whole stupid theme. And take a look. So I wanted to show you guys here. You can see at the time that I took this, it was, I guess now it's got like 900 ratings. To emphasize something I've always pointed out, number one, books that are high-profile books, the ratings should never be trusted. They are bogus in one way, shape, or form. So understand, because I know there's some people out there who aren't too intelligent, who are pretty stupid. Let me repeat. Books that have high profile, they're high profile books. In other words, they're hitting the masses. This book, I would say high profile, I would say not too much. Not too much. To some degree. So why do I say that? If it's high profile, that means it's going to be promoted all throughout the media, number one. So you're going to have a celebrity effect. Most people who write the reviews are going to be already brainwashed. They have the little hero, and they're going to chime in. Oh, it's a great book. They're just going to say, so it's not valid review. Also, many of the reviews are fake. They're paid. They're bought off, right? You see. So the less promoted a book is, the more valid the reviews will tend to be. Unless, of course, you're me and you have people that want to just put false stuff on reviews on my books just because they're pissed off that I expose the frauds and the mafia and everything, the gold pumpers, you see. But generally speaking, books that are high profile have been, a lot of, you've heard about the books, they've been around, they've got a lot of reviews. What you want to do is take a look at the 1-star reviews, 1 and 2 star. They're going to tell you the deal. You will have people that will come in. Okay. Now this one doesn't have that. The 1-star reviews are just basically they don't expose. It's surprising. There could be, but I don't recall seeing anyone saying that, oh, this book is based on a fraudulent paper. Even though the reviews, there's some recent reviews. So people don't even know this. They don't even know it's based on proven fraudulent research. Folks, this wasn't a mistake. Reinhardt and Rogoff intentionally excluded data from many countries. It's impossible to have that as a mistake. And that's why it wasn't even peer-reviewed. They threw it out there. These guys are frauds. Absolute frauds. And they should be humiliated, shamed, and they're not. They continue to be on the pedestal of providing their so-called wisdom and insight. This is what's going on. I point this out because this is how the whole system works. This is why you don't hear from me. You hear from the Alan Greenspans out there, the Ken Rogoffs, and the Carmen Reinhardts, and the Ben Bernankes. And the media tells you that they're sages. This is why you get your ass handed to you. You got it? The same goes with the investor guys, the fund manager guys. They tell you Peter Schiff is right. Right? And they're promoting Jeffrey Gundlach. And they don't show you the performance of their funds. You understand? And they even promote Tony Robbins as an investment guru. Folks, wake the fuck up. The media is one big fucking scam. Run by scammers to promote their own. It's a goddamn fact. I'll go up against anyone in the world for a debate for $100,000 to prove this. I got the fucking facts. You got it? Nobody can refute it. I got the names. I got the facts. I got all the data. I've been watching it for 20 fucking years. I got the data. I got it all. Every single person who reviewed this book, who praised it, is a fraud. Is a fraud or an incompetent baboon. And you should note this rule. Anytime you come across a book that's promoted, reviewed by someone, they're talking about a scam book by a scammer, you understand. Because these people, they do favors for each other. Oh, can you review my book? Oh, sure, buddy. They think there's no downside. Wake the fuck up. You make these motherfuckers pay the price. You let them know, hey, you endorse this book. This guy's a fraud. This is a fraudulent book. It was wrong. Why are you saying it's great? That makes you a scammer, a fraudster. You're not credible. You got it, folks? They think there's no penalty for doing this shit. You call these motherfuckers out. Let's take a look here. See, this is a good example. You can see, so there's almost 900 ratings. You can see that it was less than 600 before. I've got extensive files of all this shit. Okay? I mean, when I see a name, I just go to my files. You see? Take a look. Just go through the list. You can see editorial reviews. Okay. TIA Craft Scam Company. Don't put your money there. Council on Foreign Relations. Of course, Council on Foreign Relations. I mean, Rogoff is part of the fucking neocons. Right? You see that? Look. Distinguished Book Prize. The Atlantic. Scam. Center for Financial Studies. Scam. You see that? Of course, Andrew Ross Sorkin, the fucking shill, the piece of fucking garbage, who isn't this the guy that writes the book on John Paulson, The Greatest Trade? You know, Paulson, the guy that schemed with Goldman Sachs and designed this fund of toxic mortgage-backed securities. He got Goldman to sell it to its clients while they both shorted it. And that's a great trade. Isn't Andrew Ross, isn't he, or was it Zuckerberg? Or Zuckerman? Was it Zuckerman or Sorkin? Let's see. Let me make sure I get this right. It's either Zuckerman or Sorkin. Andrew Ross Sorkin. So about the author, he wrote this about himself, by the way, okay, on his Amazon. He's an award-winning journalist for the New York Times and a co-anchor on Squawk Box, because he's a fucking bullshit artist. Where is this? Where's the fucking... Didn't he have a book? I'm thinking of Zuckerman, I think. But anyway. Email all these motherfuckers about me. You think they don't know who I am? Better fucking believe they do. You remind them. Let them know you know. Let them know you know what's going on. The Economist. Bullshit. Take a look, folks. Once again, this is a book that's based on fraudulent research. Not inaccurate. This is fraud. Fraud implies intent. Okay? These guys intentionally manufactured horse shit for a political agenda. Okay, look. Paul Krugman. You're a fraud, dude. I mean, I've talked about Krugman before. This guy's he's a clown. Total clown. But the media tells you he's a genius. He's got a Nobel Prize. Fucking joke. Nobel Prize for doing something basically that you can learn if you run a lemonade stand. That's right. Brent Aaron's Wall Street Journal, garbage. Scam publication. Washington Post, scam publication. Just go through the list. Martin Wolf, fucking scam. There you go. No credibility. Look, read all this, folks. This is what I'm saying. Take a look. When you read all this, oh my God, they're all saying it's great. All these, how can it not be? Ask yourself, who is going to know? They're going to be fooled because they think the media is credible. Okay? Harvard Magazine, everything. Look at that. The list goes on and on. And so here we get the reviews. Okay. So Niall Ferguson, overhyped fucking clown. You know why? He's related to the guys in the media, so he's a genius. They tell you, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But they tell you he's a genius, right? Now you have no credibility. You are saying this is the best empirical investigation of financial crisis ever published. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Robert Schiller, sorry, dude. No credibility. You're in the fucking gutter. Mohammed, sorry, buddy. You see that, folks? You understand. Take a look. So, you can see this article. Why the Greek bailout failed. And so, Rogoff wants to put his little commentary here. The lessons from Greece and other unsuccessful bailout programs are sobering. If a debt bailout program requires a wholesale change in a country's economic, social, and political model, the best course of action might be to write off private losses rather than to pour public money to cover them. So, this is a guy, and you can see this is of course, featured everywhere. Bloomberg, they don't call the guy out. You understand? He's never going to be subjected to scrutiny. They're not going to have anyone say, Ken, what happened? The guy should be shamed and never heard from again. But it's just like Greenspan, right? The guy who caused, in part, one of the main players that caused the financial crisis. He's still yapping his mouth, and the media gives him exposure. Same thing with Ben Bernanke. You understand why? They're privileged, and they're geniuses because the media tells you so. Okay. I wanted to show, I have several entries on this guy, and I wanted to show you. Let me play this. So, this guy was formerly, I think, with the IMF as well. By the way. Remember, this was not a peer-reviewed paper.
According to a study by economists Carmen Reinhart and Ken Rogoff, when a country's level of debt reaches 90% of GDP, its economy could shrink by 1 percentage point every year. At today's levels of government spending, we're headed to that 90% mark by 2014. Wow.
But, when you're starting to talk about debt that gets to 80, 90, 100% of GDP, as you know, Ali, you've had many people on the show who said that's the danger zone.
The country's debt is now 90% of the size of the economy. Now, many economists say that's when an economy can no longer grow thanks to having too much debt.
Carmen Reinhart and Ken Rogoff said for countries that have debt to GDP in excess of 90%, it begins to weigh on economic growth because the cost of servicing that massive amount of debt consumes other avenues of income.
See, that's what I love about you financial folks. You've got to have a major study.
And I would urge him to read my good friend Ken Rogoff's recent paper published in January, which makes the point that once debt GDP passes the 90% level, then you will see a decline in growth.
That could very well happen in this country. Am I wrong?
Not at all. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but clearly at some point, and we know at that point is 90%, 100% ratio of debt to GDP.
It's completely free from the law of finance. And the law of finance says that once you get a debt GDP ratio much above 90%, it has implications for yields on government bonds.
I'd always heard that sort of the number that you had to be aware of is when it's 90% of GDP. That's when you start this really negative sort of feedback loop.
The you know, the debt GDP ratio, Larry, is about 71%. I mean, that's not good, but we are not in a fiscal crisis right now. There is not a budget crisis right now. The full faith and credit of the United States should not be at issue right now.
The trouble, Bob, is it's on the way to 90 or 100.
Our debt now, our deficit, 100% of GDP. Of course, 90% is sort of the tipping point, a lot of economists believe, before you just start a cycle that takes a country down.
America's most prominent economists are talking about an embarrassing mistake with big implications. The mistake was hidden inside the calculations of some enormously influential research that recommended painful austerity measures to help weak economies recover. Now, the mistake wasn't discovered by a Nobel Prize winner, a professor, or even a professional economist, but by the man we're about to introduce you to, 28-year-old graduate student Thomas Herndon, joining us now from Amherst, Massachusetts. Thanks so much for being with us. This is an astonishing story, and it revolves around you and your good eyes and an Excel spreadsheet. How did you find the mistake? How long did it take? How many mistakes did you find?
Thanks for having me. Once I got their spreadsheet, it really didn't take me long to locate the error because I'd already spent about a semester and a half kind of constructing the data on my own. And I found the spreadsheet error actually extended to the entire sample of advanced economies from 1946 to 2009, as well as the larger sample of their 1800 to 2009 sample.
Now, this is more than just an intriguing case of finding out that somebody famous did something foolish. These were calculations. This was an economics research paper that had real implications, right?
That's true. This paper was cited very frequently by policymakers in support of austerity policies that have been quite controversial, and many have argued have caused a lot of pain and suffering for people around the world.
Well, I want to ask you about that. So what does this mean, say, if you're living in the United Kingdom and hearing this, or in Western Europe, any one of the EU nations that's in retreat? Have your policymakers been making a mistake because of those numbers on the Excel spreadsheet?
I do think that this study certainly made a contribution to the policy discussion. It might be a little overreaching to say that that was the only policy or study or that they were basing their decisions on, or it was all just a single spreadsheet. But it was certainly probably the most well-known and widely cited study in support of these policies.
And the authors are very famous American economists, Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhart. I'm just curious, have they spoken to you? Have they gotten in touch with you since this?
Not really. They had the public response, and then we did send them an email because we wanted to just really clear up that we weren't trying to impute any dishonest motives or anything like that to the authors. That was not the point of the paper at all. We were just merely checking the accuracy of their claims.
So there you have it, folks. And those articles, by the way, you can see there's a partially published. They're closed for members only and clients, but you can see some of it. There's other articles as well. And you see, these guys have not been shamed. Why? Why is that? You're talking about a massively influential paper that was used by the IMF, by the ECB, to invoke austerity, which caused a harsh recession in the EU and resulted in a decade of deflation. Rogoff should be in prison. This is fraud. Right? But you don't hear that. He's celebrated. You understand what I'm saying, folks? This is not an isolated incident. This goes on all the time, different variations. Whether we're talking about economics clowns from this group or the fund managers, the hedge fund guys, they always get a pass. Everything is great. You understand? This is the reality. So let's move on now. Talk about our friend Kyle Bass.
You went to TCU where you studied finance and real estate. You worked at Bear Stearns in the Dallas office in the 90s. You started the Legg Mason office in Texas. How did you first get interested in investing, global macro, and geopolitics?
Oh boy. Look, on the investing side, I was a chemistry major going in. I thought I wanted to be pre-med. Then I ended up taking a non-major elective in options and futures. And I read the entire course book in a week and changed my major that week.
Interesting. You hear that? That's funny. I didn't know that. First I ever heard about that. But it's not surprising, right? So Kyle supposedly was a chemistry major, right? He was a chemistry major, and then he took an elective and ended up reading the entire course book in a week. And I guess he figured, shit, this is easy stuff. I can't hack chemistry. It's too hard. Folks, this is what so many of these business majors do, from my experience, from what I've seen. They all start out allied health. They try and take general chemistry and they flunk. And they walk across the street and become business majors and make straight fucking A's. Okay? I've seen it over and over again. It's very common. You see, I noticed he goes through this video and wants to tell you that he's got this science and math background that's kind of, somehow benefited him in his investment in insights, and so, which I find completely ridiculous, given that I've got an extensive science and math background, but I never come out and say, yeah, he's just a fake. Anyway, let's listen to what he has to say here.
It hit me that was clearly what I wanted to do. It was just a moment in time, my junior year in undergrad.
Think about that for a second. Does this story, is it believable to you? And I say, well, you say, well, gosh, Mike, what does it matter? It matters a lot. It matters a lot because if this guy is fudging something so trivial as this, what does that say about being able to trust anything he says? So, I don't know, maybe it's correct, but it sounds to me a little bit wrong, a little bit fishy. You got a guy who is going to college and he wants to study, he wants to be a doctor. So he's going pre-med. Think about it. Think about all the time, and you're focusing on this for years, right? And you change completely because you're taking some introductory. What did he say again? Let's listen to this.
Get interested in investing, global macro, and geopolitics?
Oh boy. Look, on the investing side, I was a chemistry major going in. I thought I wanted to be pre-med. Then I ended up taking a non-major elective in options and futures. And I read the entire course book in a week and changed my major that week. But it hit me that was clear.
Okay, that's interesting. An elective on options and futures. First of all, let me just say this. Any university, and I think he went to TCU, which I don't really have a high opinion of, TCU in, I think, Fort Worth. But any university that has a course on options and futures is kind of not too credible. Why would I say that? That's not, options and futures is not academic coursework. That's like kind of trade school stuff, right? It's kind of silly. That's kind of very weird, actually. But anyway, so let's think about this a second. I don't know that you're going to take that as a freshman. So I don't know how far he went as a pre-med, but apparently it sounds to me like he was maybe in a pre-med for at least a year, maybe a couple of years. I would say by that time he realized he wasn't going to make it. I'd like to see his transcript. Right? So, the bottom line is I don't believe his story. I believe he wasn't cutting the mustard, and he went to that area. Which, if he's lying, then is he reliable? Is he trustworthy? Nonetheless, let's just move on. Not too.
Clearly, what I wanted to do. It was just a moment in time, my junior year in undergrad. I grew up in a family where I had a great mom and dad. They didn't save any capital for retirement or for school. We were kind of called lower middle class. We were on a hotel manager salary. And when we moved to Dallas, we worked at the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So I had a good life. It wasn't a silver spoon life, that's for sure. And so right out of school, I was just enthralled with financial markets. I was always a math and science guy.
You hear that? He was always a math and science guy. Okay.
There are those two. I guess you're probably all of them, John. You probably have the ability to assimilate language and reading and math and science. I was always a math and science person, so it was a natural progression.
So you hear that? It was a natural progression. So he's attributing his investment prowess to his math and science background. I mean, think about that for a second. That tells you right there. For me, when I look at the guy's background and I look at his track record and see how he's trying to rewrite history, I have to believe he's a con man. Okay? If he had a great investment track record, which he does not. In fact, let me go ahead and show you something here. Take a look. This is for 1 year. This portfolio gained down 50%, I guess, at this point. And let's take a look at another one here. There you go. Take a look at that. So you can see 2012 minus 8%. February 2000. Oh, this is a monthly. Wow. Okay. So for 2012, you can see year to date he's down 29%. You can, of course, these hedge fund guys, they don't publish their data unless it's good. They withhold it. But I've talked about Bass's failures many times. He made one call which wasn't even that. Folks, anyone who bet on subprimes, they didn't know the financial crisis was coming. Okay, I mentioned this many times before, and it seems to have escaped everybody in the world but me. Maybe because I'm the guy that actually predicted the financial crisis. Let me explain, and we'll move on. If you thought there was a good chance of a recession, and everybody and their mother knew that there was clearly a problem in housing, there's no doubt about that. Everyone knew that housing prices were crazy, they were out of control. However, there's a big difference between a potential housing bubble and a financial crisis. The difference between that is like the difference between night and day. Okay? Please understand that. So, I think just about everyone knew that housing was in a bubble. What happens when you've got a bubble? It eventually pops. What happens when the housing bubble pops? Well, many things, of course. Real estate prices are going to go down. But what happens if in that bubble it's due to, in large part, trash mortgages that have been granted to people who should not receive them? Well, those mortgages are going to default. So all Bass knew was the same thing as these other guys that have been celebrated as heroes knew. They just knew there was a real estate bubble, which everyone knew, and they also knew that a lot of the mortgages were bullshit, which basically everyone else knew, right? They made a bet against subprime mortgages. Subprime means below investment grade. It means junk bonds. It means poor credit. So they basically bet that those would default. So all they were betting on was some type of an economic weakness or correction in the real estate bubble, which would cause the weakest link to break. Do you all understand that? That would be the subprimes. If they really knew there was a systemic problem that would lead into a financial crisis, they would have done what I wrote about in advance. Remember, these guys didn't even tell anybody what they were doing in advance, and they didn't write anything. They made a fucking gamble. They made a bet. That's it. I wrote in 2 books that the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, the government-backed entities, right? Government-backed. I wrote that they would collapse and be bailed out. I recommended to short not only the subprimes, that's the easy call, but the investment grade, Fannie and Freddie, which nobody thought would ever have a problem. I recommended to short the banks with caution because I said they're going to be bailed out. I recommended to short General Motors and General Electric because I knew that they had been transformed over the years into banks. Nobody else knew that. Okay? I wrote about the stock market collapsing. I wrote about Dow 6,500 as a collapse in the market in the book in 2006. The Dow bottomed in March 10th, 2009 at 6,500. You understand? So Carl Bass did not predict the financial crisis. Michael Burry did not. None of these guys did. I'm the only person who did. Think about it. Nobody came out with the written, published, detailed analysis and provided investment recommendations that were very accurate and profitable in advance. These guys made a bet. They didn't disclose their bet until it won. And their bet wasn't even, it was an easy call. Okay? So let's just want to remind everybody of that.
Well, it's amazing, and I know you're, in my mind, having.
By the way, this guy is a fucking spaz. This guy is a total fucking doofus. Let him know I said it. What's his name? John Hartley. Apparently, he's a PhD student, or he's got his PhD now at Stanford. He runs this. Apparently, it's a podcast through Hoover Institution. Listen to this guy. I watched this video maybe about 10 minutes or so. And this guy I noted, and I want to tell you now so you can kind of think about this if you agree with me. This guy is such a fucking idiot. I mean, I never thought I would say that I'd rather hear Kyle speak. Like, I'd much rather hear Kyle speak. This guy, he wants to prove himself, like he's intelligent, he's informed, and he just rattles with this like kind of autistic, like Elon Musk blabbering that gets nowhere, and he doesn't shut up, and he goes on to tangents. Okay, so listen to so I want you to listen to this as we listen to this interview, and it's just torture, for me anyway.
Followed you and your thinking for a long time. I think you're a real icon of the Dallas finance community, which is something that has grown a lot in just the past few decades and even just recent years. I mean, there's all these firms now that are moving from, say, New York or California to Dallas. I think Toyota and so forth, but also all these banks are setting up their second.
What? He's an icon of the Dallas. What is he talking about? All these firms, all these financial firms are moving. Toyota? What? What's the fucking idiot? Anyway.
Headquarters.
Notice how he feels the need to just throw in his 2 cents, which is not worth even 2 cents, and he won't shut up, right?
there. Goldman Sachs is building a big office there. But you were there at the beginning of all this and all these early shifts and moves to Dallas early on. So I commend you for being a staple of Dallas finance and for not having left as well. Like many people might. I want to talk about the financial crisis because I feel like the financial crisis was just a
So you hear what he's basically saying with that. He's great. What he's not telling people, maybe he's too stupid to know this. Kyle Bass is essentially out of the hedge fund business. You all know this, right? Now he still has his Hayman Capital, and he probably still has his little Hong Kong dollar short trade going on. You all remember I exposed. You can watch on the channel the other videos. Kyle Bass with Raoul Pal, Raoul Pal, the fucking con man, fraudster, investment disaster, who claims to have predicted the financial crisis. It's Raoul Pal, Real Vision fucking scam. He promotes this Lynn Alden scammer. You all understand. Raoul Pal with Steve Bannon and Kyle Bass teamed up with Miles Kwok. Remember that? The Chinese guy, the Chinese billionaire real estate tycoon that came out and talked about how evil China is and China's bad and this and that, and they all ganged up together on Raoul Pal's Real Vision. Anybody remember that? I did the videos on it. Look at the channel. And I knew something was up when I saw this shit a few years ago. I said, well this is something is not right here. First of all, that Miles Kwok, something is not right about this guy. He's very convincing. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. But guess what? All con artists are very convincing. Okay, something didn't stack up. Okay, and then when I saw Kyle Bass with Steve Bannon, and they're all getting together, I knew it was to try and bash China, to create negative propaganda, because I knew Kyle Bass was trying to profit from it. Remember, Kyle Bass is the same guy. Not only, he failed with his Japan trade, thinking Japan's going to have a sovereign debt crisis, which is impossible because he doesn't even understand how a sovereign debt crisis happens, apparently. I wrote about this in 2012. He thought they were going to have a sovereign debt crisis because of their debt, right? He doesn't understand the dynamics. He failed with his General Motors call. He failed with his drug trolling, drug patent troll, right? Thinking he's going to challenge the whole drug industry for their patents. Complete joke. To the point where he's getting so desperate that he was caught posting some things online to try and make money shorting a stock, a REIT. Okay. Kyle Bass essentially shut down his fund because the performance was shit. And take a look at the performance of every other person who has been credited with predicting the financial crisis that runs money. Their performance has been shit. Why? Because they didn't predict the financial crisis. They made a bet. It was an easy bet. It's that simple. Okay? Meanwhile, I was banned. I wrote 2 books that anyone could have made a fortune off of. You could have made up to 30 times, 30-fold, if you followed the recommendations. Do I need to remind everybody? Do I need to remind everybody about that? Let's take a look and see. Well, these are just quotes. What you can see in the video, actually. Let me get to the video. I want to show you. By the way, I'll just go ahead and play this video without the sound. while I'm talking. And so you guys can be reminded of the challenges I have. The $1 million challenge. Take a look. This should make major news. Of course, I've had this challenge for 15 years. I've increased the amount. Okay. See, and this is the reason why I've done this, is to show people that I've been banned by the media. Okay, I've been banned. You understand? And I'm this confident. I know I've got the top track record in the world. I don't need ChatGPT to illustrate that. I know I do. Okay? And I want people to know what's going on with the media. Okay? So let me just explain, get back to this with Kyle Bass. Kyle Bass, essentially, although he still has his hedge fund, but ask yourself, what are the assets in there? Probably the only major trade is he's still shorting the Hong Kong dollar and trying to kind of hedge through that, such that, you know, he's probably got some other things that are hedging that so he doesn't continue to lose his ass. But Kyle Bass has been shorting the Hong Kong dollar for years with his whole investment thesis, thinking China's going to collapse, not understanding. It's kind of like, to some degree, George Chanos, where George Chanos has been shorting China, talking about the property bubble in China since 2012. Anybody know that? He had to shut his fund down recently. Okay? I'm sorry, not George. Jim Chanos, right? And here's how it works. Anybody can see when there's problems. Okay? But when you're talking about the investment world, you better know when those problems really fucking matter to place a bet. Because if you get it wrong, you're going to fuck it up. You understand? China had many issues, many significant issues several years ago. They had actually, you know, several real estate bubbles. Right? This time is different with China, by the way. Okay? And I'm releasing the China report 2025 here pretty soon, which is essentially almost 200 pages, single-spaced. 2 documents, in addition to many other things. I'm not going to advertise that here, but just the point is I'm all over China. I've been researching China for more than 20 years. I know exactly what's going on with China, and my accuracy rate on China is extremely high. You can take a look at the ChatGPT analysis, in fact, on the China material. In fact, I'll go ahead and show you here. You can take a look right here and read it. The analysis on the China Report 2022, China Report 2019. China Report 2025 hasn't been analyzed because I haven't released it yet. Okay. My track record on China is essentially flawless. So, and of course I covered China in the research. My point is that Jim Chanos was talking about a collapse in China for years and years, and of course he was on CNBC. They'd promote him, and you all know these guys are all contrarian indicators. Jim Chanos finally had to close his fund because he just was so fucking wrong for so long. Now, to what extent, how much he bet on a collapse in China, I don't know. It could be that he didn't bet a whole lot. He was just kind of promoting it as a way to look like a hero if he's right, but if he's wrong, not to lose much money. Because a lot of times these guys do this shit. These guys are very sneaky with their little tactics. But it could also have been the situation whereby people maybe didn't want to give him money anymore because they noted he's been wrong on China for so long, you see. It's also a possibility. So, take a look. You can see, here you go. This is what I'm looking for. You see this, folks? See this? if you had bought puts, as what I also recommended, is a safer way, take a look. You could have made up to 30-fold on GM, Fannie Mae. Take a look. You see that? You don't need to have leverage through buying credit default swaps, which were not available to the retail public at that time, by the way. You could have gotten involved in massive leverage through buying puts. Take a look at that. Boom. You got it? Show me someone else in the world who did this. I made it available for everyone, for you, and I got banned. And I'm the bad guy, by the way. Right? I'm the bad guy. I did all this to help everybody in the world. And I'm banned, and I'm the bad guy. Does that make sense to you? Who's the real bad guys? Who's the good guy? Who's the real expert? Who are the frauds? Why is the media promoting con artists and contrarian indicators and frauds? Why? You think they want to help you? They don't want to help you. They want to put you in the fucking wrong side of the trade so that Wall Street takes your money. Wall Street pays all the money to the media. Who do you think buys all the ads on CNBC, Bloomberg, Wall Street? You got it? They're in a business relationship together to fuck you, the audience. Let's get back to this now. So now he's going to talk about the financial crisis in Kyle. Let's hear what he has to say. And once again, notice how this guy he rambles and he it's kind of like a child, like a teenager trying to show you that he's so knowledgeable, right? Once again, this is a guy, he's an economics professor, I think at Stanford, or certainly a PhD student. You can look into it, but I'm pretty sure he's a PhD at Stanford who runs the Hoover Institution podcast. He's a fucking clown. He's a junior chump. Listen to him.
Defining moment for many careers in finance, and perhaps including yours in terms of, I think your skyrocket to fame. I mean, you made these bets against the subprime mortgage market through Heyman, and later you testified to the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. I mean,
so you hear all that? Now you all know the truth. Anyone hearing me, you all know what's going on. Nobody else in the world knows what's going on. You all know that the subprime bet was a fucking chump bet. It's the easy money bet. He didn't bet against Fannie. He didn't bet against Freddie. He didn't bet against the banks because Kyle Bass didn't know how bad it was going to be. He bet against junk bonds. Junk bonds are going to default during economic weakness. You understand, folks. Why isn't anyone telling you this? I'm the guy that knows this. I predicted the crisis, the only person in the world to have done so. Fact. You all understand how you're being misled. It's not just this, folks. Virtually everything out there you're hearing is horse shit. And I'm not, once again, the alternative is not the alternative media. That's all horse shit. Everything out there is shit. You're not getting the truth on basically anything. You're certainly not getting the full truth. It's all agendas, all ad-based bullshit, all disinfo, all distraction. That's fact. That's what I have seen based upon my critical analysis of observing all this stuff for more than 2 decades. And it's gotten worse. It wasn't this bad 10 years ago. It wasn't this bad 20 years ago. It's gotten progressively worse and worse over the years. It's really, really, really fucked up now. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said it's all horseshit, everything out there. I would have said it, yeah. The financial investment realm, yeah, that's all horseshit. Now it's extended to politics, healthcare, everything. It's all horseshit now. Everything. And you also notice he said, oh, you testified before the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission. Yeah, well, they wanted me to testify too until they heard what I had to say. They didn't like my answer, so they cut ties with me. Think about that one. That alone in and of itself is worth, so that story needs to be told. Why doesn't someone want to hear the details? I've got the evidence. I've got the emails from Chris Seifer, the lead investigator. I've since tried to locate Chris Seifer. I can't find him. Go look online. Where is he working? I can't find it. Last I saw, he was at maybe UCLA or some firm in California. I don't see that firm now. I checked the firm. He's not listed as an attorney. Can't find him. Because I want to call his ass out. Hey, Chris, I can't find him. I don't know where he is.
How did you first come to start thinking that there was trouble with the housing market in the U.S. in the 2000s and that it might end up in some sort of catastrophic state?
Yeah, I think that first of all, back to your question, the prior question about what got you into the financial markets. What do you care about? When I was at Bear Stearns, I worked on Bear had a risk arbitrage department. Where I think they were one of the best, and call it institutional risk arb with mergers and acquisitions and things like that.
That's bullshit. Yeah, one of the best. That's whatever. I worked at. Kyle is so full of shit. He didn't work in no risk arbitrage department. How do I know? Because I was working in the same fucking office as he was in Dallas. There was no risk arbitrage office. What the fuck you talking about, Kyle? What kind of horse shit is that? You say you were working with them. Yeah, okay, you're working with them. Just like I'm working with investment banking. Just like I'm working with departments. You're not working in those departments. Kyle Bass, okay, was 30 feet away. His office was 30 feet away from my fucking desk. Okay, there was no risk fucking arb. We were working in a fucking retail/institutional brokerage. Okay. He was running. He was placing. He was basically placing orders for hedge funds. They went through him. That's how he made his money. He got commissions on that. That's all. Anybody could have done that. Anyone can do that business if you can find the clients, you can do it. Risk arbitrage. Come on, dude. There was no fucking risk arbitrage in our office. What are you talking about?
I was always a special situations analyst, meaning, I was...
What? Now he's calling himself an analyst? I hope you're not referring to... Kyle, let's be careful here because let me tell you guys a little story. Okay? When I was at Bear Stearns, now understand my background, nobody at Bear Stearns had my scientific background. None of the analysts even. I have a master's in biological chemistry and biophysics from the University of Pennsylvania. And I have massive other coursework that I've taken. Okay? I could not even discuss, I could not mention my background on any type of written or digital communications to clients or prospective clients. Think about that for a second. Compliance, and basically, let me tell you all, compliance in the securities industry, and I'm not talking about, commodities, futures, this fucking compliance is a joke. That whole industry is boiler room. I'm not even going to get into that. In the securities industry, and I'm not, basically the brokerage firms that for equities and fixed income, when you're talking about, Series 7 type stuff, the compliance is extremely restrictive. It's selectively restrictive. It's basically focused on the little guy on the trivial thing to make it look like they're really policing the system. And meanwhile, they let the big guys with the bullshit go, which is why there's all the fraud. That's done intentionally, by the way, through the SEC. But my point is this. Compliance is very stringent in that industry, believe it or not. Okay? If you want to send a fax out, you have to go through compliance to get it approved. Every email you send out needs to be approved. Okay? Bear Stearns had some of the most lax compliance in the industry. in terms of major firms. I mean, you got boiler rooms that they don't have any compliance. It was amazing. This is the one thing, the people that went to Bear Stearns, because Bear Stearns didn't have a training program. It's a firm that you're already established, you go to. Okay. So when people go to Bear Stearns, they're like, oh wow, I can't believe it. I can send out a fax. I don't have to get approval, for instance. Okay. My point is this. Even though they have the most lax compliance, I could not put on any type of written communication that I had a master's degree in biological chemistry, biophysics out of a chemistry department. Why? Because they didn't want me to somehow imply that I was an analyst or had like expertise. I mean, forget saying an analyst. I couldn't even say that. You understand? I couldn't even state factual information about my educational background. Okay? So the reason why I'm telling you all this is because Kyle is saying I was always a special situations analyst, which through compliance you can't say this if he's working at Bear. Now, I guess he's saying I'm kind of like, that's the way he thought, is special situations. Okay? But someone could take it where he's kind of saying he did this work at Bear Stearns, which is not true, FYI. Let's listen to this again. I want to hear how you stated it.
Risk arbitrage department, where I think they were one of the best, and call it institutional risk arb with mergers and acquisitions and things like that. I was always a special situations analyst, meaning, I was...
So you hear that? So he's talking about the risk arb, how he worked in that department, which is not true, telling how they're the best in this. So he makes it sound like, oh yeah, they come to him for mergers and acquisitions. He wants to assess the risk. Are you fucking kidding me, Kyle? Get the fuck out of here, dude. You are so full of shit. This is very disingenuous. Should you be surprised?
Technology, there was no vertical where I was an expert. It was just trying to dig into each M&A situation, each spinoff, each bankruptcy, try to understand the operative parts, i.e. just whiteboarding these things, John. So,
Kyle, if you try to understand bankruptcies and you were working for the great risk arbitrage department and all this stuff, how come, by the way, if that's the case, how come you bought into JCPenney and it collapsed? You bought into JCPenney several months after I made the call publicly to short it because it was going to go bankrupt eventually. There was no way out. Maybe because you jumped in after George Soros and Bill Ackman, thinking that they're geniuses, and they fucked it up as well. You see that? You can look at all this stuff up, folks. I've documented all of it. It's amazing. The media fucking does it. The media gives them the platform to post all this bullshit.
When you whiteboard something and you dig in, you just have to have a deep intellectual curiosity, which I also know you have.
So he's telling you he's got a deep intellectual curiosity. So what Kyle did, his deep intellectual curiosity, is that he wasn't clever enough to kind of do the research on his own. He hired a private investigator to go through and see how easy he could get loans, mortgages. Does that sound like deep intellectual curiosity to you? If you want to see deep intellectual curiosity, why don't you take a look at my fucking publications? Okay? Take a look at my books. This is what spawns a deep intellectual curiosity. If when you do some massive research and you go through and you expose the entire nation of America. Okay. And not only did I predict the financial crisis, you can see here, I also detailed the trade issue that you're hearing about now with China. I disclose all this stuff, which is why Washington used my book as a desk reference, as reported to me during the first Trump administration. And so you can see, read the chapter. It's freely available on my profile, on my website, on archive.org. You can see 41 pages. Okay. And cashing into the real estate bubble. This is the chapter here. And you can see the recommendations. I even show you how to short. And I give you specific stocks. When to short. A tutorial for free. You got people that are going to make courses charging you $1,000 on this shit. They're going to copy my information. Why do you think I'm going to give my shit out for free? Nothing. You got people that are trying to scam me. Use my shit and fucking name it as their own, like Tony Robbins does, by the way. He's done that at least one time. He's been sued for that. Anybody out there, FYI, you get my shit, you use it, you're going to get sued. I will sue you. I will sue the fuck out of you. Trust me. Guaranteed. Go give it a try. There you go. NFI, bankrupt. Lind went bankrupt. Fremont went bankrupt. You got it? You understand, folks? Fannie, Freddie went to fucking $1 below 1 pennies. You understand? Countrywide Financial. Look at that. Take a look. I'm talking these major banks here. I even show you the charts. Home builders. So anyway, and of course here, talk about Dow 6,500. Give some excellent advice on other things. Just take a look. Take a look. That's predicting the crisis, folks. That's not just intellectual curiosity. It's intellectual superiority. I had to say it. Remember, Kyle Bass bet on the subprimes. He bet on junk bonds. He bet against junk bonds, which is the easy call to make. Even if there's economic weakness, you're going to make money. If you think a financial crisis is coming or something systemic, you're going to bet. You're going to get all the bets you can. You're going to buy puts. You're going to short the banks, Fannie and Freddie, home builders. You understand? I don't expect, of course, even in that situation, I wouldn't expect Kyle to understand GE and GM were fucked. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about, folks. You're getting you're getting here from me, as you always do, the truth that you're not going to hear anywhere else.
And you can't teach that into kids, into employees. I believe they have it or they don't. And
you don't
having
have it,
that
buddy.
deep curiosity for how things work, what are the proclivities of the players, and then how do you handicap, the potential outcomes. I think again on Wall Street you only need to get like 55% of those right, John. So I think that as we got into the launch of our firm, so I launched my firm in January of 2006, and at that time, Asia was exploding. That China just entered the WTO in 2000.
So what really kind of annoyed me about this whole video is that, understand, folks, think about this. Kyle Bass is coming out now, and he's come out before, telling you how he predicted the crisis, which he didn't do. But you got these so-called interviewers who are going to ask him the question, how come he wasn't coming out before the crisis and telling us these things? In hindsight, after it happened, he's looking back and explaining things that really didn't happen in his mind. You see, he's creating fake history. Why didn't he tell us this during the time? Right? Because he didn't know. It's complete horseshit.
2002, it was a big moment in time when money was really flying into Southeast Asia. At the same time, we all knew that our housing markets, everyone knew the housing market was overcooked. Everyone knew that it was really easy to borrow money. And as you know, you didn't even have to have a job bartenders could have 2 or 3 loans. I went to ABS West out in Las Vegas, and I was sitting in a Bellagio bar waiting for friends to go out to dinner, and it was just me and the bartender. And I said, "How's it going?" And she said, "Well, it's going fine, but my houses are killing me." And I said, "What do you mean your houses?" And she said, "I have 3 homes that I've been able to buy here in Las Vegas, and I rent them out, but my tenants are giving me trouble, and they turn over too fast." And I'm like, "Wait, how do you buy 3 houses?" And she said, "Well, I just ask for a loan and they just give me one." And literally that happened while I was sitting at the bar. It's much deeper than that, but that was just an anecdotal confirmation of why I was there. I'm thinking, it's crazy that a bartender can have 3 loans. And so the intellectual curiosity was, okay, how big is this? How much capital is out there in a disassociated risk paradigm? Because that's basically what it was. And then you have to figure out, well, how does that play into leverage structures? Levered hedge funds just blow up. Well, that's fine. That's not a really systemic problem for the U.S. financial system. And what does it do to the banks? And then once I started going down that.
So you hear that? He's talking about. You understand the fucking bullshit he's giving everybody. You understand? He's talking about leverage in the banks, and Kyle, you didn't short the banks. You didn't short the banks. You didn't know a financial crisis was coming. You shorted subprime mortgages, the easy call, the junk bonds. Shut up, dude. I consider what you're doing right dishonest.
Rabbit hole, you realize that Lehman was 36 times levered, and they had a huge amount of this stuff on their books. Merrill had 50-60 billion of this in a warehousing facility. Bear Stearns was again 29 times levered. But you lever yourself 30x, and you end up owning assets that lose 40% of their value, and you can do it's just a math problem. And so I came to the conclusion that the whole financial system was in real trouble.
You hear that? So he came to the conclusion the whole financial system was in real trouble. Well, Kyle, why didn't you short the banks? Huh? Well, I don't understand. You understand, folks? Easy for him to say now. I'm the only person in the world that wrote about this in advance, in detail. Not only that, not only did I recommend shorting the subprimes, the easy call, I recommended shorting the government-backed agencies, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I recommended the banks, shorting the banks. I recommended shorting the home builders. I recommended buying precious metals with an exit strategy, by the way. Okay. I recommended going to cash, waiting for the collapse, which I said the Dow could go to 6,500, which it did 2 years later, March 10th, 2009. No one in history has ever come out with these accurate, stunningly accurate, precise forecasts. This is beyond legendary. I'm just being honest. Think about that. And I'm banned. Nobody knows about me. And meanwhile, they promote guys like Kyle Bass as having predicted the financial crisis, which he did not. And it gets worse. You even have clowns, like people think Peter Schiff predicted the financial crisis, and it gets worse and worse after that. If you all don't understand what I'm saying, then there's something wrong with your fucking head. You should understand everything I'm saying. I've explained it all. The only thing you have to do now, if you don't trust me, is go through and verify. Read my material and see what I'm saying about all these guys. Nobody predicted the financial crisis but me. That's a fact. Write it down. It's fact. I'll debate anybody. Anybody. I'm not some fucking idiots on YouTube. I'm talking any of these guys or anyone in academia. Okay? I'll debate any high-level Wall Street guys, any high-level fund managers, any of these guys, anyone in academia. Let's go. Nobody will come to the table because they don't want to look silly. And all I have to do to make them look silly is state the facts. You see, folks, at this point, it's a danger for academia, the establishment, to acknowledge my credibility as the world's leading investment analyst. And perhaps, as ChatGPT said, maybe the best in modern history. They don't want to do that. The same reason why the Trump administration, I was anonymously provided a tip that they're using my book in the first term. Why? Why not? Why? Because they're not going to come out and say anything. Why? because they don't want to associate with me because I've exposed all the bullshit, including, I continue to expose Trump. You understand? The establishment does not want to, at this point, it's much worse. I mean, 20 years ago, the establishment, for the most part, it wasn't that situation too much. I mean, I exposed the inner workings of the U.S. economy, Wall Street, so on and so forth, but it wasn't as bad for them. But now, after exposing what happened during the financial crisis, after the financial crisis, exposing all these things, nobody from the establishment would not want to give me the credibility that I deserve, because then it's going to shine a very bad light on them, you see, because they're part of the problem. They are the problem. You understand? So it's a no-go. They can't do it now. They're afraid. Look at this. He went to meet people at the Fed. He met Rogoff. See, look at he's still, even now, this guy is giving credibility to Rogoff, who I've already shown to be a fraud. Can you believe this shit? Dude, what a fucking...
And went to meet with people at the Fed, went to meet with people like Professor Rogoff at Harvard, who at that time hadn't written his famous book, but as you know, he was kind of the father of sovereign balance sheet analysis. So, again...
Father of sovereign balance sheet analysis? This is coming from a guy, Kyle Bass, who bet that Japan would default, would hit a sovereign debt crisis on their debt. So I guess he the reason why he believed Rogoff's fucking fraudulent research. Dude, you're a clown. You are a fucking clown. I explained I first explained in 2012, and I'll go ahead and show you guys, FYI. And you can see a ChatGPT. Where is it? The 2012 Mid-Year Global Macro Analysis. This is available for members. This was about 200 pages. And I explained why Japan would not enter a sovereign debt crisis. And I explained what the principal ingredients were, what you needed, why, what you needed to have. This is a very, very basic treatment. So Kyle doesn't understand what's required for a country to enter a sovereign debt crisis. This is why he got it wrong. He probably doesn't understand it because he trusted Rogoff, the fucking clown. And he claims Rogoff is the king of sovereign balance sheet analysis. Well, are you fucking kidding me? Dude, you are a clown, dude. That's why you had to shut down your hedge fund. By the way, his hedge fund's effectively shut down. He may have certain 2 or 3 certain investors in this Hong Kong dollar fucking trade, which, will never fucking pan out, even if the Hong Kong dollar does collapse. I mean, he's lost so much money on it. But let me remind everyone, when he's involved with Miles Kwok, the guy who now, remember the tycoon, they did videos on him, right? Vice did a video on him. Raoul Paul teamed up with him with Steve Bannon to trash China. Miles Kwok is in prison now. He's a fraud, okay? Kyle Bass took money from Miles Kwok. Remember, Steve Bannon's the guy that defrauded the Fund the Wall campaign with Mr. Kolfage. I exposed all that shit instantly many years ago. I emailed Kolfage and told him I'm going to fucking contact the feds on you, dude, because you're defrauding people. Okay? Bass's fund was investing illicit proceeds from Miles Kwok. Why Bass didn't get in trouble for that? Know your customer rule? Interesting. Right? Do you all know this? Come on. I already covered this in some streams a long time ago. So Bass, what is he doing now? He's buying up farmland to generate carbon tax credits to sell. That's his investment fund. He's a farmer. That's right. He's a farmer. Right? The great legendary guy who predicted the financial crisis. No, it didn't happen. It's not true. He's now a farmer because he didn't cut it in the hedge fund business. You know why? Because Kyle Bass was a gunslinger. He's a special situations guy. You know what that means, folks? You're not investing. You're gambling. You're looking for some type of thing to pop. You don't have an ability to analyze and value, for instance, high-tech stocks, which he's admitted he doesn't know how to value those stocks. He doesn't understand that type of thing. What he understands is special situations, apparently. You know, the drug patent thing, which he lost on. His bet on the Japanese default, which he lost on. His GM bet, which he lost on. You understand what I'm saying, folks? That's Kyle Bass. He's not exactly, you know, at the top of the intellectual mountain, which he wants to, you know, kind of imply that he is. This is the reality. Okay. Take a look at this ChatGPT analysis here on this report. This report was I discussed the requirements for sovereign debt crisis, what was needed for that. In fact, yeah, well, there you have it. So, anyway, once again, this is not about me, but I have to show this to prove a point. Okay. So let's listen to this now. What else we got here? So you hear he's trying to position himself as, yeah, I saw the whole system was going to collapse. No, Kyle, you didn't. Just like you didn't see what was going on with Japan. Your drug patent trolling didn't work, right? You had to shut down your fund, and now you're selling fucking farmland. You're buying farmland to create carbon tax credits. You're planting trees. Kyle Bass, he's planting fucking trees. You all know that, right? That's how you generate carbon tax credits, right? You get some land and you grow trees. You all know that, right? That's what he's doing. I mean, this is what he's doing. Okay?
I'd go out and meet with people.
By the way, Kyle's like Jim Rogers. He's like all these clowns. These are promotion guys. They have no... Folks, for me, like, you can't interview me unless you got a big platform. I'm too good. I'm not going to be interviewed by some fucking idiot, some chump with this chumpy ass audience. If you have a platform that interviews con artists, you'll never interview me. It's not going to happen. You've got to be high-end, upper echelon. Okay? You know why? Because I'm big swinging dick. I'm good. I'm damn good. So I'm not a marketing guy. I'm not a perception guy. I've got the goods. People that are perception guys, they'll go in front of anybody. They want the promo. They don't care. Jim Rogers, I've done videos showing you, he will be interviewed by a channel that's got 200 subscribers. Okay? I've seen it. Take a look. I've seen it. I've shown it. I've got the screenshots. Kyle Bass will do it too. Why? Because they're PR guys. All these guys are PR guys. They're selling an image, a perception. It's the same ad-based content media model. Put out the content. We can sell ads. Right? The guy putting out the content can be seen as an expert because the media says he's an expert. And he can sell his books. You can invest in his fund. You understand? He can get endorsements and deals. The Kevin O'Leary business model, the Mark Cuban business model. You understand? The Nigerian knuckleheads business model. All these fucking clowns. The same bullshit. Kyle Bass is doing it too.
and say, talk me off the cliff. I would say, explain to me how I'm wrong, please. I need to know this. Because if you remember, once everyone became aware of the situation, we were all wondering where money was safe. We were actually wondering where our savings were going to be safe, if it was going to be safe in JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley, or, well, I guess Morgan Stanley wasn't a bank yet, but they had to become one, right? So it was just a moment in time where intellectual curiosity and the ability to analyze special situations came together.
That's amazing. And I guess
you hear that? So you hear that? It's amazing. His ability to analyze special situations. He's basically saying he predicted the financial crisis. He knew the whole system was going to collapse. He did not know. That's a lie. Kyle, show me written evidence of that. Show me even betting on that. Even if you had bet on that, doesn't mean shit. It's a bet. You can hedge. You can get out of it. You didn't even bet on that. You bet on junk bonds. You bet the junk bonds would collapse. Junk bonds are the first assets to go under. You don't need a financial crisis for that. You don't even need a recession. All you need is a weakness in the economy. You understand what I'm saying, folks? This is the truth, the reality. You're not going to get anywhere else because it doesn't benefit these fraudsters in the media to promote the truth, to give you the truth. They want to sell you an idea that there's an investment Superman, an investment superhero. You understand? It's all about hyping up people to get you to watch their shit so you'll generate more views. They can get more advertisement revenues, post their affiliate links, so on and so forth. So now we can hear this guy respond. Remember, listen to this guy. He's a clown. He wants to prove that he's knowledgeable. He rambles off and on. It's torture to hear him just go on and on. Go ahead, let's listen to what he says.
Yes. You've also made some successful bets too against Japan and Greece. Speaking of sort of sovereign debt crises, I mean, how did your thinking around those come about? That's sort of around roughly the same time period.
Yeah.
There's sovereign debt.
Think about this.
So here's where Kyle wants to explain himself out of. He wants to tell you that he didn't lose money on Japan. I'm gonna fast forward. I don't want to listen to all this garbage. But basically, what he says, oh well, yeah, we bet against the sovereign, but we also bet, we made a bet on the yen. So our bet on the yen more than compensated our losses on the sovereign debt. Is what he wants to tell you here. Just let you know what he's going to say. I'm not going to waste time on that. You notice he doesn't talk about his epic failures and his epically terrible performance after the financial crisis, which is why he had to close the fund down.
It's amazing.
Essentially, not officially, but essentially.
And the whole story of Japan is, I think, a super interesting one. When you think about it, and
so listen to this guy ramble. Listen to this fucking moron, dude. Move on. Shut your mouth. Ask the question. Move on. You see, he wants to exert himself as some type of a knowledgeable expert, and he's a fucking idiot. This guy makes Kyle seem really intelligent.
It's something I've been sort of reading a lot about and saying a lot. I feel like Japan is kind of strangely ahead of the U.S. and the Western world, maybe by a few decades or so. Think about
exactly right.
The sort of asset bubble, some people call it, but really just the collapse and flat GDP per capita there that began in the 90s. And you look at most of the Western world, except for the U.S. now, has had flat GDP per capita since the early 2010s. But even other topics, you think like industrial policy, that was something that Japan is perhaps famous for.
So you hear how this guy, he's trying to give you a little lecture here, right? You wonder who's doing the interviewing, who's the feature here. This guy is an idiot. He doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. He's rambling. He doesn't even know how to interview people. He's clearly insecure. He's an economist. What do you think? Of course he's going to be insecure because the economists are fucking useless.
In the 80s, they were doing so much lending that the Basel I Accords had all to do with containing the Japanese banking system and constraining their equity ratios at that time. So it's a fascinating. They were first at quantitative easing. They're, I think, still the only central bank that's actually bought up stocks. So it's They're very interesting and instructive, I think, for a lot of reasons. They're the first company, to really go crazy on debt to GDP and sort of recent times, first, advanced economy and 250% debt to GDP, and now their bond yields have been skyrocketing just recently up to the 30-40 year bonds have been jumping in yields, and I guess there is this, you could call it.
But can you hear this? What a fucking idiot! Like, what is he talking about, dude? What is it? This guy has like major ADHD with autism. Like, what the fuck is going on? Can you believe this guy? What a fucking joke. So, by the way, did you hear what he said? He said Japan is the only central bank. The Japanese central bank is the only one to buy stocks. Remember, this is the Stanford PhD economist. You don't know what you're talking about. It's not true. The Chinese central bank has been buying stocks for the past 3 years. They've even publicly announced it. Hong Kong had bought stocks before, and their central bank had bought stocks. The Swiss bank had bought stocks. I mean, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Did you all hear that? What a fucking clown.
This financial sort of repression sort of issue where, or you could call it fiscal dominance, really, where there's this challenge where they can't let interest rates rise because their net interest costs will just totally balloon. I mean, do you have any thoughts on Japan, and like if there is some sort of a sovereign debt crisis looming, is Japan the first to go, and does that end up being some sort of a domino in your mind?
I don't.
So he's asking a guy who bet on a sovereign debt crisis for Japan 15 years ago and got it wrong. This is how stupid the guy is. He doesn't even know. This guy is just, folks, this tells you, right? This is proof positive how stupid these economists are. This guy's got a PhD from Stanford in economics. And he's a fucking idiot. Dude, stay the fuck out of investments in the capital markets. Don't ever talk about it. Don't ask anybody about it. Don't give us your 2 cents. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about, Mr. Hartley. Okay? The Hoover Institution is a fucking joke. Really. So let's listen to what Kyle has to say. I don't know what he's going to say, but it looks like he's kind of pushing back. He doesn't really, because I guess he's remembering how much of a failure he was on the sovereign debt crisis. Let's hear what he has to say, though.
I think Japan's got it under control, and I mean.
Okay, so he learned. So he finally learned his lesson. Of course they do, Kyle. Like I wrote about almost 15 years ago, dude. You should have taken my offer. Okay, you should have taken my offer to be your CIO. See, I don't know if you guys know this. I mentioned this before. I met Kyle after the crisis. His office at that time was at the Rosewood building, which is across from the Crescent complex, which is where we both worked at Bear Stearns. Rosewood is a nice building. I don't think it's as nice as the Crescent. I mean, the Crescent's, the French colonial architecture. You can look it up. But Rosewood, newer. And this is when I was, I was doing my healthcare book I was kind of writing during that period. I remember it was, it was 2009 or 10. I think it was 10. Anyway, I was at Panera. I went over to Panera, hang out, lunchtime, and I saw Kyle there. I didn't know it at the time, but I guess, his building, his office was in the Rosewood, which is next to Panera. And so, I never really saw Kyle much in the office. I'm not going to get into that, but apparently he was paranoid, in the brokerage industry, especially Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns is like the fucking super parasite. So, people don't trust anybody. They're afraid you're going to steal their customers. It's kind of what I learned, kind of how people were. They were all paranoid. So apparently Kyle never wanted to discuss anything. He didn't want to talk to anybody. He kept his office closed. I don't know this for a fact, but that's just kind of what I was told and what it seems like. And but anyway, I didn't. The bottom line is I didn't really know him. I spoke to him when I first interviewed at Bear Stearns. And in fact, the branch manager, this is funny, I just thought about this. The branch manager, who was a spineless fucking moron who nobody liked, I can guarantee you Kyle didn't like him either, although he probably will say he liked him. But the branch manager told me, because Kyle was one of the guys that interviewed me. You see, Kyle, he was the lead producer. He was making the most commissions. And what he told, I don't think I've told this story before. Actually, it's not a story. It's kind of a little anecdote. But so Kyle, I don't remember what we talked about. And I was fairly new in the industry. But so Kyle was one of the people he kind of interviewed me. I guess I have to pass the muster. You see, when you're the lead producer at a brokerage firm at the office, you got a lot of power because you're bringing in all the money. You see, and so Kyle's in sales. He's a salesman. He was doing a lot of business, basically doing order execution. You see, order execution for funds. So basically, he had if you're doing execution for institutions, you basically have at Bear you could call the trading desk. You can't do that at other firms. You can't do that at Merrill because it's all retail there. So, but anyway, so Kyle told the branch manager, he says, this guy's going to be a superstar. So I find it kind of funny because, it's kind of interesting, right? But anyway.
A way where if you have a population that has a significant Japan has one of the oldest populations in the world, Japan and Italy, and they've got a demographic crisis, right? They've got a crisis where it's really difficult to grow your sovereign if your population, your endemic population, is not growing, and so they're not. There's a fascinating thought to have here, and it's one that I haven't really discussed that much. But when you think about fractional reserve central banking, which is the way we all operate, and Japan is a poster child here, I have a theory on why the demographic curves are hooking down in the U.S., in Europe, and in China and Japan.
Okay, so he's going to talk about why the demographics are going down. Let's hear it. Now, some of you, probably not many of you, know what I've talked about before. In fact, there's a video that I released. I clipped it out of the research. I'd had a discussion of the longer-term fate of Asia's in trouble. It's in deep trouble. Okay, and I discussed exactly why. See, I explained exactly what's going on, and so it's interesting. So I don't know what he's gonna say, but he's lumping in the whole world basically with the demographics issue, and actually the U.S. is in the best situation with demographics of major countries, and the U.S. isn't going to have much of a problem. Europe is probably not going to have one either. China's in trouble. Japan's in deep trouble. And all of Asia's in deep trouble. And I'm not going to get into all that why and so on and so forth. But the point is that clearly the reason is much different for Asia versus the West. Apparently Kyle doesn't think so. He's going to give us his reasoning here. Let's listen to what he has to say. Kyle, the special situations analyst.
So if you think about the way these systems work, is they typically, by the way, almost no sovereign ever defaults, John. They get into a crisis, they print and print.
So Kyle finally learned that. He finally learned that. This is what happens, folks. What's going to happen with a country that's in a debt problem, which, aside from major issues like a geopolitical military conflict, major countries aren't going to get into a sovereign debt problem. Okay, it's not going to happen. So in the case where they have a lot of debt, in terms of problem of default, what will happen is that they'll just weaken the currency. The currency is going to get weaker. Okay, that's what will happen. Now, when you're talking about third world shitholes, no, that's a different story. But even most of them will end up just printing the currency. Apparently, Kyle didn't really understand that. If he really understood this back in 2010, 2011, when he bet against Japan, he would have solely have dealt with the yen and not dealt with the Japanese debt. But he didn't know that. Now he finally learned his lesson. So he's going to tell you now. He's not going to tell you all this, what I told you, but he's going to tell you as if he's an expert and he knows what he's talking about. But the fact is that he got his ass handed to him learning the hard way. Something that I wrote about. It's not that difficult to understand, I don't think, of why you're not going to get, you can't have, folks, you're not going to have sovereign debt crisis if you print your own currency, okay, and if you finance your own fucking debt. That's the bottom line, okay, for the most part.
Money, expand a balance sheet, but they always pay. They rarely, if ever, stop paying. So we get into a situation where you look at where Japan is, and
anyway, I want to hear
if you engage in this type of central banking activity, and you kind of lose your fiscal moral compass to where you just run huge deficits and you print the balance and you suffer inflation. If the men in your economy, when they graduate university, can't afford to buy a home, they live with their parents. They're not having sex, they're not having kids, they're not marrying. So when you look at the marriage rates and you look at the fertility rates of the average women across not only the developed world, but China, when real estate prices rip.
So I can see where he's getting at. So basically he's saying the whole world is facing a demographic problem because people can't afford anything because the banks are printing money. That's probably what he's going to say, which is not entirely correct, actually.
And wages don't go with them. You create yourself an endemic problem in your economy. And so Xi Jinping has figured this out. He figured it out when he said financial security is national security. Note he has not stimulated his real estate market. When home prices in China got to be 26 times median income, the men couldn't afford homes. So the demographers had this arc of the demographics of China, Japan, the US, arcing out to 2050 and heading down around 2050. And now they're all collapsing. The reason they're collapsing is we just injected 50% inflation in dollar terms into the world. And that's our demographic curve here is hooking down. Europe.
He doesn't know what he's talking. He's completely wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So he's saying that. And of course, I wrote. I'm the first person that I know of that wrote about America actually exports inflation through the link, or the dollar oil link, the petrodollar. I wrote about that. I'm probably not the first person ever. I can't believe there's no way I could be, but I'm certainly the first person to have written about that as it pertains to this current situation in this century. No doubt about it. But he's basically saying that China has a demographics problem because the U.S. has exported inflation. It's not true. It's not true. I'm not going to discuss the reason because I don't like want people to steal my unique research. See, that's the great thing about my research is that it doesn't reach everybody. So you know what? It's almost like, to some degree, kind of like insider information. Not officially, but in other words, what I'm saying is that if my insights are correct and they're highly unique, like nobody else knows them. So the people that do have them, it's almost like they're gaining from insider information because the more people that know highly valuable, unique insights, they become less valuable. You see, they become less valuable. They're no longer valuable. I mean, everybody knows what I'm saying, right? If everybody knew, if everybody had read my books before the financial crisis, then nobody would have made any money if they all acted on it. Think about it, right? Theoretically, you see? Why? Because everybody on the wrong side of the trade would have gotten out of that trade, and they would have gotten in on the right side of the trade, and the right side of the trade wouldn't have been as good, right? You see? In many cases anyway, depending upon what you're talking about. Okay? Depending upon what you're talking about. But for the most part, what I'm saying is that highly valuable and unique insight, to a large extent, remains highly unique and valuable to the extent that it's disseminated. If it's disseminated open to everyone publicly and accepted or even embraced, then it's no longer unique and no longer that valuable for the most part. You see? No longer unique because then it becomes kind of, you'll have people that will kind of make it commonplace. You understand? So that's why I'm not going to disclose what I believe to be kind of a simple answer to explain why China has this problem. And it's not because of their one-child policy. Of course, that's had an impact, but it's not why. Okay? The same reason why China has a demographic problem is the same reason why all of Asia's got the demographics problem. And I'm not going to disclose that, not to for free anyway.
It was already
you say, well, what's important about knowing that? Well, if you know that, if you understand that fundamental issue, then you are positioned to potentially gain somehow financially, investment-wise, because you understand the dynamics responsible for some trend. And if those dynamics change in some way, then you will be ahead of the curve. You understand. That's the value of unique insight and analysis and forecasting. That's what it does. It doesn't. True research analysis doesn't tell you when to push the fucking green button and red button, right? The buy and the sell. What it does do is it provides a platform for intellectual engagement to give you an assessment of what's going on, a risk assessment, and you're able to do two things. You must be able to do two things. You must be able to customize that research for your own situation, your own investment objectives, your own risk profile, right? I mean, think about it. I mean, some people might be 85 years old and they can't take the risk. They need that income. They need that liquidity, right? Versus a young person who can take a lot of risk. You see? The second thing you got to do is use that information, that research, because there's no crystal ball. Research is dynamic. Things are always changing. The key is that to be able to understand to what extent, if any, the new information, the new data that's constantly entering the spectrum on a daily basis, to what extent, if any, that data is going to change your assessment and forecast. That's the key. That judgment call and understanding when the information changes the analysis and forecast, because inevitably it will at some point, right? And that's why research is constantly updated to reflect those changes. So the research should provide you, the second thing is the ability to take that analysis and information and alter things when the data calls for it. You see? Somebody asked me one time, they couldn't believe, because they're so used to daily bullshit, being kind of like a chicken with its head cut off, running around the road. That's kind of how most people are in the investment world. Most retail, they're fucking stupid. They're idiots. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Buy the S&P. You're not going to beat it. Because they're constantly led by the media, the financial media, including ScamTube. Buy this. This is great stock. Do this. So they're just running around the daily stock of the day, this and that. They don't have a strategy. They don't understand what's going on, right? Or they're getting gurus who talk about bullshit. They don't know anything about valuation. They don't understand how the markets work. So the person asked me, how are you able? How can you come out with research once a month? I don't understand how you can do that. Like how can you do a forecast? Because they're used to hearing, okay, they're so short term. You know how difficult it is to come out with a forecast every month? It's extremely difficult. But that's the only way to do it. You see? In the meantime, the people that have the research should be able to understand if there are changes that come and how to respond to those changes. You see? I don't answer any research questions for free on YouTube. You should know why. I don't give my information out for free. I'm not going to let anybody copy my stuff or use my stuff. Okay? People that have high value don't give it away for free. Okay? People who don't have high value give everything away for free because they're promoting perception to try and sell their bullshit. I will never give away my shit for free. Not going to happen. Okay. You want to hear what I have to say for free? I need 1 million subscribers at least, very quickly. You understand? What I have to say needs to go to a lot of ears. It's not going to go to your ear. You want it to your ear? You want it to be special information, unique, valuable insight? You pay the fucking money, or you don't get the information. That's the way it goes. I offer my research for free to the world 18 years ago, and I got banned and shut down and told people it would be for free. I started my own firm in research because I got shut down. I had to have my own website. So it's the people, the same people out there, right? You all are the reason why. You understand? Because you all don't do anything. You got it? You're all fucking greedy, man. You're all fucking greedy. That's why the situation is the way it is. So that's why the world is fucked.
Hooking down, Japan was already hooking down, and China's demographic curve collapsed. So the way that we operate our central banks and the way that we kind of financially engineer, I heard you almost say financial repression in Japan, the way that we financially engineer our economies has consequences. And those consequences are, we both know that asset prices far exceed wages. And so real wages have been massively negative, even though the Fed is not saying that. The reason the Fed's not saying that is because they chain weight inflation. So if you look at it in reality, asset prices have extended themselves to where it's not conducive to appropriation and families. It's just fascinating.
So I was exactly correct what I said. So he's basically saying the demographics problem is because of the Fed, central banks. It's not true. It's not true. Now, is it true in the West, in America? To a large extent, yes. Yes. What you're talking about, Asia, it's not true. It's not true. There's a different dynamic going on. Okay? Kyle doesn't understand it because Kyle doesn't understand a whole lot of things. Okay? That's the reality. Okay.
Yeah, and you think about zoning too, and land use regulations, which is sort of.
Okay, so here goes this fucking clown again, rambling like he's half drunk. Listen to this.
Pervasive in most countries. I mean,
So we heard the answer. Kyle gave the answer, and here's his response. So here
about zoning. About
consequences are, we both know that asset prices far exceed wages. And so real wages have been massively negative, even though the Fed is not saying that. The reason the Fed's not saying that is because they chain weight inflation. So if you look at it in reality, asset prices have extended themselves to where it's not conducive to appropriation and families. It's just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's okay. Great. Yeah. Interesting. So it's that's all he has to say. But what does he say instead? Listen to his response.
And you think about zoning too, and land use regulations, which is sort of pervasive in most countries. I mean, maybe Japan being one exception, some Eastern European countries, some exceptions, but real estate has become so expensive, prohibitively expensive around the world, and I think that to some degree is causing there's some empirical evidence that has negative effects on fertility. I mean, that's not a surprise. People can't buy their own homes. They can't really get married and have children. So it's amazing how quickly all this land use regulation and how quickly real housing costs, if you think about home prices.
I mean, what's wrong with this fucking guy? There's something wrong with this guy. Something wrong with his fucking head. You all agree? I mean, this is a fucking moron. Dude, you're supposed to be a reflection of a think tank at Stanford. You're a professor of economics. You sound like a fucking high school kid. What are you talking about? Do you know how to conduct an interview? This guy's a fucking idiot.
Over the past 150 years, if you look at like the Case-Shiller index and you net out inflation, that trend is like basically flat from like the late 19th century, late 1800s up until like the 1970s and 80s, and it's just on a total upward trajectory. And some people say zoning, some people say it's other things, but regardless of the cause, it's hugely prohibitive, especially for young people. So
Well, and then there's a natural progression if you're intellectually curious. If in fact that's the case, and you look at FHFA's own index, the U.S. government's own unchained weighted housing index was up 50% between 2020 and 2024. 50. So wages certainly are not 50 between 2020 and 2024. If you follow that naturally to call it the next node on the timeline, all that does is it tears the social fabric of both our country and the world. So the poor are already poor; they didn't have any discretionary income. So it makes them much poorer on anything they have to acquire to stay alive. Call it food, rent, inflation, whatever, gas, whatever you're doing. And then it prices the middle class out of being mobile. So it immobilizes the middle class. What does that do? Well, it creates tension because it ends up in the rich's hands. And so
you notice, of course, so Kyle wants to tell you, he didn't want to tell you explicitly what's going on. You understand? Oh, well, it's the central banking policy. Kyle, first of all, you don't know what you're talking about. It has nothing to do, for the most part, with the problems in Asia. The U.S., okay. But why don't you spell it out, Kyle, so people can understand, like I have spelled it out earlier when I talked about the 0% interest rates that have robbed pensioners, robbed savers, allowed the banks to borrow essentially with no interest and to buy up real estate, which is what they did several years ago. Okay? And it's created all these asset bubbles. But why don't you talk about that and then talk about how this is a boom and bust economy that's been created by the Fed that rewards the big guys. It rewards the corporations, it rewards the Wall Street guys, and when the collapse comes, middle class pays the price. He doesn't want to talk about specifics because he's a shill for a warmongering neocon council on foreign relations. That's what he's a shill for. And he won't even bring in the other topics. The money problem is one aspect. He talks about the social fabric. Kyle, why don't you talk about immigration policy? Why don't you talk about the wokeness and all these other issues? Because that's what's going on. That's been going on for a long time. The cost of living issue has been a problem essentially after COVID. The destruction of the U.S. social fabric has been going on for decades. Okay? So, he doesn't want to talk about that. Anyway, the guy is very disingenuous, and he wants to come out like and it's just disgusting to me how these people prop up all these guys. Folks, it's the same song and dance, the same MO. All these people, you never get anyone asking difficult questions, a critical analysis. It's always about promoting the person. Okay? That's why you don't get the truth. You never get the truth. You never get the critical, the hard questions. Does this guy ever ask about any of Kyle's failures? No. Does he even bring up the fact that Kyle, he said, Kyle, you bet against the Japanese debt and you failed, you lost. What happened? What Kyle did instead, and you can, I skipped that area, that piece, you can listen to it yourself. Kyle realized that people remembered him for that. So he came out and gave his kind of little version of how he made money. He wanted you to think he made all this money. Remember, his performance sucks. That's why his fund is essentially shut down. Not officially, but you can take a look at the assets. The assets are very, I would say they're so small that it's underreporting. You don't have to report if it's under 200 million. Okay, his focus is on his private equity fund, his carbon credits bullshit. I forgot what it's called. Okay, so of course, Kyle is on this Hoover institution because Kyle is in the Council on Foreign Relations. It's not some elite group. He paid for membership, okay, because he wants to get connected. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to meet influential people so he can get a political position or he can get money through a fund. That's what he's doing, okay? And Hoover Institution is a neocon organization. Council on Foreign Relations is also neocon, by the way. So that's what you're talking about here. No one else is going to call this shit out. Anyway, that's all I've got this time.